All right. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening on a very windy evening in Placerville. Will everybody please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, again, welcome, everybody. I was a little concerned earlier today, too, that with power out to half the city, that we might be having part two of festivities like we had 2 weeks ago when we were all online and lost power a couple of times. So thankfully, Mother Nature has cooperated, at least to this point. So we will get going so that we can get through everything tonight. So with that, can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Clarici?
Here.
Councilmember Gottberg?
Here.
Councilmember Yarbrough?
Here.
Vice Mayor No? Here. Mayor Zaragoza?
Here. All right, thank you. No ceremonial items tonight, no closed session report. So we'll move to item 5, which is adoption of the agenda.
I'll move the agenda.
I'll second.
All right, we have a first and a second. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Clarici? Aye. Councilmember Gottberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Yarbrough?
Aye.
Vice Mayor No?
Aye.
Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye. All right. Item 6, announcements and presentations to the public, and item 6.1, which are brief comments by the City Council. And we'll start with Councilmember Gottberg.
I have none tonight.
Councilmember Clarici.
Shout out to everybody that got the snow, the wind, the rain taken care of in the city of Placerville. Once again, great times. Also, don't forget, we're going to have a presentation on it, or at least something. Saturday, Fire Safe, here, starts at 9?
It's not
9.
here.
It's not here?
It's down at Midtown Mall.
I'm sorry, it's not the Midtown Mall.
You could be here at 9.
My job would have become much easier if I showed up at 9. Here. Sorry. That's it.
All right. Vice Mayor.
I had just a couple things. The Saturday event, I walked Main Street, dropped off flyers. They're always looking for volunteers. If you're looking for a volunteer opportunity. No, it's Midtown Mall, down the street, Saturday, 9 a.m. And then Councilmember Clarici and I went and talked to some of the members, business owners on Main Street to talk about the bell tower and possible future events and what that might look like. So we just did some outreach, and that's it.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Yarbrough.
I have nothing at the moment.
All right. Thank you. And nothing for me. So we'll go ahead and go to item 6.2, which is a Placerville Fire Safe Council update. The event at 9 o'clock at Midtown Mall.
Yeah. The old food shed.
So just quickly, we have these flyers that I passed out to you, Mayor and Council. These are actually not a flyer as much as it's the agenda for the meeting. I was about 20 minutes ago informed by Mr. Acuna that he would not be able to attend our meeting tonight due to some conflicts. So just I think we can do that from up here. Encourage everyone to attend on Saturday at Midtown Mall. This doesn't actually have the location on it. I was just looking, but it is at Midtown Mall, which is 651 Main Street, I think. Anyway, I think everyone knows where the Marshall Lab is on Main Street. That's where they'll be doing it both inside and outside on Saturday, beginning at 9 o'clock and going from there. So Jackie or Michael, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I was just going to say they put a lot of work into this event this year. So there's a lot of neat stuff. And once an hour on the half hour, 9:30, 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, they're going to burn down the town. Virtually. They're virtually. They have this table, and it kind of shows how the fire would come into Placerville and what it would look like. And so there's a lot of neat stuff, so hope everybody can stop by and check it out.
What you're saying,
The-
look for the smoke and we want to go find it.
Yes, follow.
Virtual.
The address is 681
681.
Main Street for your information.
Yeah, we'll have our new state senator and assembly member joining us as well, which is great. for our new delegation for Placerville. So it's a great chance to meet those elected officials for our city as well, if you can make it out. All right. I will open up 6.1 for any public comment. All right. Oh. Or 6.2, excuse me. All right. Seeing none. Any other comments on that one? All right. We will go then to item 6.3, and that's a presentation regarding the US 50 Corridor Action Plan, all known to us as Trip to Green. And Rebecca will kick this off for us.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you're aware, the US 50 Corridor Action Plan, better known as Trip to Green, was a pilot project that included a report out of the results related to the 3 weekends that Trip to Green operated this past fall, the first weekends of August, September, and October. A part of that report, it summarizes system user analysis, which basically discusses the who, what, and the where of the traffic that utilizes Highway 50 through Placerville. Preparation of the access control plan that basically became the Trip to Green pilot project plans, if you will, and what ultimately led to how we were set up during the 3 Trip to Green weekends. Covers, once the pilot weekends were completed, options then were looked at and considered, and how we can move forward, which included looking at past proposed projects, development of a permanent Trip to Green project, continuing a temporary Trip to Green project, and a no project scenario. And then the report also looks at financing strategies and how it relates to the initial construction costs of the project, as well as ongoing maintenance and considerations. A part of all of this was public outreach, which included a community survey, a merchant-specific survey, and 3 workshops, with the most recent workshop held February 16th virtually. At this point, I'd like to introduce Mr. Brian Gant with Wood Rogers, who is under contract with the El Dorado Transportation Commission for the action plan. Mr. Jerry Barton is here from the commission. And, he's here this evening to present the draft action plan, which is actually available for public comment through March 24th. It can be accessed from the city's main website, as well as on the project-specific page, and it's also available on El Dorado County Transportation Commission's website as well. Council members Clarici, No, and Mayor Saragosa, who sit on the Transportation Commission, have already had the benefit of viewing this presentation, but they also mutually felt that it would be helpful to have this presented this evening as an informational item. So take it away, Brian.
Oh, now it is.
Okay, thank you. And again, for the record, Brian Gant, Project Manager for Wood Rogers, and thank you for the introduction, Rebecca, and thank you to City Council for allowing us to present. As she mentioned, this is a summary, so some of you may have heard bits and pieces of this along the way, or if you participated in the EDCTC presentation a few weeks ago, this is the same information. So this isn't everything that's been incorporated into that draft document, but it's kind of a high-level summary of those elements that are incorporated within it. So we'll start off by touching on the background of the study and a little bit of the why. Talk about the access control plan piece or the Trip to Green piece of it, followed by the system user analysis element, get into the investment strategy results, and finish up with a little bit of what we heard from the public and how that informs potential next steps. So first and foremost, the study background, we're really focusing on the downtown Placerville area with respect to US 50, but when we do elements such as the system user analysis and looking at who's coming through here and where they're going, our study footprint is a little bit bigger than that. We're kind of focusing on US 50 a little bit broader than that, but we'll be spending the majority of this time talking about US 50 through downtown Placerville. And the purpose for this, I'm sure everybody in this room knows, way more than I do, some of the issues out there when it comes to congestion. So the 3 signalized intersections through downtown Placerville during heavy traffic periods often result in congestion when there's, no signals on either end to the west or to the east of it. And so during those heavy peak weekends, those backups and queues can last for quite some time, causing a lot of potential people coming off US 50 going through town trying to find ways around that congestion. And so that's what we're trying to address through this process. And this is really built upon a lot of effort over the years, going all the way back to 1996 and a Caltrans project study report that looked at grade separations and flyover ramps and that kind of thing. And the potential solutions to address this congestion have kind of varied over time and evolved. This study is most recently following the US 50 hotspot study, where it seemed like there was a little bit more renewed interest in looking at some of the older concepts that have been looked at, as well as some unique ideas like Trip to Green. And we've been working on this for a couple years. We're hoping to be done a little bit sooner to this and roll out the proof of concept for Trip to Green during the summer of 2021. Unfortunately, there was a little thing called the Caldor fire that got in the way, and so that had to be pushed out, and then the Trip to Green was rolled out this last summer. But here we are wrapping everything up early in 2023. And through this whole process, we've been working with the project development team, representing many of the agencies that are involved. So this has truly been a collaborative effort. That project development team helped provide a lot of input and a lot of coordination for all the elements of this study, but in particular the Trip to Green element of it. And we've been working closely with Rebecca, EDCTC, Caltrans, as well as first responders, the county as well. So this has been a group effort to get this study moving forward. So let's hone in on the access control plan piece, and otherwise known as Trip to Green. So the focus of this element of the study is the 3 signalized intersections through downtown, as well as the unsignalized intersection there at Center Street. So that's really the focus, when we zoom in on the Trip to Green piece of this. And the overall concept was to have continuous green for your US 50 through traffic through town, over these kind of weekend periods or visitation periods. And then as part of that, you would have to prohibit local movement. So, for example, going across US 50 or maybe making a left turn from the local street on US 50. Those would have to be prohibited to, maintain that continuous green on US 50, as well as incorporating detours to get around and, particularly say like State Road 49 and getting that traffic across town and through. So continuous green, managing your local access, and then detouring through movements. So the Trip to Green proof of concept was rolled out this last summer, first weekend in August, Labor Day weekend, and then the first weekend in October. And that gave the team the chance to really kind of get a good cross-section of some data. So you had kind of a typical summer weekend, you had a 4-day holiday weekend, and then you kind of had that first weekend that's kind of the beginning of that Apple Hill season. And for each of those things, the elements were rolled out Saturday to Sunday, or Monday in the case of Labor Day weekend, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And this was an opportunity to put that concept to work and get some data back to see how it operates. So some of the takeaways that we were able to take away from that proof of concept, it seemed to pretty well address the congestion issue on US 50. Some of the data that Caltrans provided showed that average travel speed through Placerville remained at around a consistent 40 miles an hour. It didn't, when you compare that to non-Trip to Green weekends, you'd see these spikes all over the place, but during Trip to Green, very consistent for travel speeds. And from a safety standpoint, no crashes were reported during the Trip to Green operations, which is truly a good data point to hear back on. Some of that traffic feedback that we got from Caltrans showed that, westbound delays are a little bit more significant versus eastbound. We kind of see a bigger push when it comes to westbound traffic. And so with that in mind, there is the opportunity moving forward, if Trip to Green were to be implemented again, there are opportunities where it could maybe just be implemented on Sundays, because we do get a bigger push on Sundays. The results also suggest a narrow time frame than the 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. can be considered. So with the data we received, again, we're able to kind of see these buckets of when we see that congestion. So that time frame could be narrowed down if Trip to Green were to be implemented again in either direction. And another good data point was, the feedback we heard from emergency responders is they reported no issues being able to, get their response times to keep their metrics and access to where they needed it to go. So a lot of good feedback on how Trip to Green rolled out, and it was the whole purpose of doing that proof of concept. So that was the first piece of the study. Second piece is the system user analysis, as Rebecca mentioned, the kind of who, where, why piece of data. And to do that, we did kind of a data dive into available applications to develop an understanding of corridor users, travel patterns, demographics, that kind of thing. And then that information could be used to inform the plan as well as the investment strategy piece. So some of these data points are really important for the investment strategy piece that we'll cover here in a minute. And to do that, we utilized a location-based device data product. It's called Replica, but we all now have these little location-based devices on us at all times, and so that anonymous data can be used to pull out different pieces of information in terms of where people are going, what times they're traveling, how they're traveling. So it's really robust data set that we simply didn't have in our industry just 10 years ago. So I won't go into all the analytics that were analyzed as part of the system user analysis. It gets pretty deep into some different data elements, but kind of give you the high-level summary of some of the pieces that came out of it. And a lot of it kind of reinforces what most of us probably already know. So if we compare weekday traffic in pulling it out of the system, we looked at Thursdays as a comparison time frame versus Saturdays. We see that the average trip distance for traffic coming through downtown Placerville increases quite a bit. So what's the average distance that a car going through downtown Placerville is traveling on a weekday versus a weekend? Increases from 96 miles during the week to 104 miles on the weekend. That tells us people are coming from further away on the weekends versus where they are during the week, which again kind of fits what you would expect. You get more of that Bay Area traffic coming through on the weekends versus commuter traffic during the week. Similarly, when we looked at residents versus visitors during the week, oh my gosh, can't see that. We see the percentage increase a little bit in terms of non-resident trips. So on a weekday versus Saturday, we get about a 2% shift. Now that may not sound like a lot, but when we're talking tens of thousands of cars, that's actually a meaningful number. In fact, that shift between weekday and Saturday traffic represents about 6 times the population of the city of Placerville. So that is a lot of bodies going through that corridor, extra bodies going through that corridor on a Saturday. So third piece is the finance and investment strategy. And the objective of this was to conduct what's called a sketch level, or that means kind of a high planning level study to determine the potential order of magnitude of revenue if tolling were implemented to help fund solutions for US 50 congestion. So at the end of the day, there aren't buckets of money laying out there to implement solutions and improvements. So this is an opportunity to see, should tolling be considered as potential option to help pay for this stuff. So the investment strategy analyzed 2 different scenarios. First was an elevated express lane concept, and I'll describe that a little bit more in a second. And the second scenario is a permanent trip to green infrastructure, which we'll describe in a moment as well. But it is recognized that tolling would be kind of unique here. It's not implemented in the corridor right now, and so it would require a lot of additional studies and approvals. So again, this was really a high-level version to simply inform just general viability. So scenario 1, the elevated express lanes. The cross-sectional picture there kind of illustrates what the concept would be, where you would grade separate traffic. That elevated traffic would be your through traffic that is not destined for or originating or destined for Placerville. It's going through. That's that extra, couple percent shift on the weekend, for example, would use the elevated express lanes to continue unimpeded through town, while local connections would still be there on the surface, as shown on the bottom of the graphic there. So, if you're trying to get to, say, Center Street, you still have those connections there, which would continue to be, signalized as they are today. So in this concept, the western terminus of that grade separation would be Placerville Drive, and the eastern terminus would be Mosquito Road. It's kind of a planning level look at, those might be reasonable locations to stop and start it to make it work. And the assumptions are you have one lane in either direction, and with this type of infrastructure, it's permanent infrastructure. So that separation is there 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It's always there. And when the investment strategy also assumes an toll exemption for local residents, and that's true in both scenarios. So the results from that suggest that the express lanes would take away about 25 to 35% of the total corridor volume. So about a quarter to 35% of the volume that's out there on US 50 would take the elevated tolled option. And at peak toll rates of about $1 to $1.75 compared to about 50% for off-peak rates, the annual gross revenue would be about $1.4 million in roughly today's dollars. Now that would be used to potentially offset the $200 to $300 million in construction costs alone for that type of grade-separated infrastructure. So a pretty big price tag for that type of heavy infrastructure, as you would expect, with a nominal ability to try to pay that down through tolling. So scenario number 2 is a permanent trip to green infrastructure. So the same concept of the trip to green that was rolled out this summer, but instead of cones and people and temporary signs, you would install permanent infrastructure. So it made it really easy to implement trip to green as needed. So examples of that would include, say, gates, something that's similar to what you would see for like a railroad crossing, as well as dynamic signs, other signs and information boards that would say, boom, trip to green is on, and those movements that are part of it, part of those restrictions are no longer available. And with that, the signals on US 50 are held to green along with that type of infrastructure. Now, in this scenario, where in scenario 1, that hard infrastructure is in place and you can use those grade separations, 24/365, we had to make an assumption as to how often trip to green would be implemented. And the assumption was 5 holiday periods and kind of 7 typical fall weekends. So the permanent infrastructure would be used to implement trip to green about 12 times under this analysis. And US 50 traffic in this particular scenario is tolled using overhead gantries. So there's no stopping. You just drive right through and you go unimpeded, and you either pay through existing tolling infrastructure like a fast track or you're sent a bill. Again, as with scenario 1, there are exemptions for local residents in this analysis. So that local resident exemption is assumed to be about 10% of the traffic going through there. So that leaves about 90% that you're collecting tolls on when Trip to Green is in place. And over those 12 weekends, you'd have it implemented. The toll amount may fluctuate from about $1 to $3 depending on demand. And from that, you could get annual potential gross revenue of $620,000 up to about $1.8 million. That would help offset about $16+ million worth of infrastructure. So smaller gap in this particular situation. We do see a range here in terms of the potential gross revenue, where we didn't see that so much in scenario 1, and that accounts for what's called diversionary traffic. So you assume that some folks are going to be like, I'm not paying $2, come heck or high water, and would use local streets to try to get around from paying that toll. So that's why you see a little bit of a range there. So those are kind of 3 elements of the overall study. So it now brings up the idea or the question of next steps and what those next steps might look like. And there's kind of 4 different options that have been identified in the plan as, for consideration. And the first is the easiest one, that's do nothing, just keep things the way they are today. The second would be continue with temporary trip to green operations like was rolled out this last summer, kind of as needed. Third option would be to pursue that permanent trip to green facilities for use as needed, tolled or not, but in some form or another. Option number 4 would be to pursue permanent infrastructure project in the form of something like that grade separation, that big heavy project. So 4 different potential next step options. And those were brought to the public for additional feedback through 3 different rounds of public outreach. The first round of public outreach occurred at the end of last year, and that included a survey, getting feedback on how Trip to Green operated, how do people feel about it. And some of what we heard was over 87% surveyed said that peak seasonal congestion on US 50 had impacted them at some time or another. Now, that's probably not a shocker. Anybody that uses US 50 is going to probably be impacted during those peak periods. But specifically for Trip to Green, nearly 57% of respondents said Trip to Green made it easier to get around, while 30% said more difficult. About 7% didn't really see a difference, and 6% didn't travel, so it didn't mean anything to them. Similarly, 70% of respondents would support future use of Trip to Green. That includes 57 who said yes outright, like just the way it was, and 13% said, yeah, I could support it with some modifications, for a total of 70% potentially in support. And then again, we had about 30% that said no. So there seems to be kind of a consistent 30% there that aren't fans of Trip to Green. January, we held another public workshop right here, and that was to get feedback on those next steps, those 4 potential next steps that we just walked through a second ago. And just general, kind of, the public was asked, do you like any of these ideas? Do you hate them? Or do you like them and could live with it with some modifications? That was kind of the feedback that we tried to get from participants. And some of the takeaways from the January workshop, there really was no interest in pursuing the elevated express lanes option. I think it seemed like most folks recognized that that was a very big price tag, and it was going to be a long time before anybody could afford to pay for that. So we didn't really see any interest from the group in that heavy infrastructure option. There's definitely some mixed reactions to tolling to help fund improvements. There was kind of a range of support and lack of support for it, and it really kind of ran the gamut. For something like that, probably because devil's in the details. What is a local that gets exempted and that kind of thing. So understandable that there would be mixed reactions for something like tolling. In general, another takeaway is that Trip to Green would be supported with potential refinements to schedule. We talked about kind of different days and hours that could be played with. There could be interest there in terms of refining schedule and for better signage. One of the things that we heard back from a few folks was folks traveling through town didn't realize that they couldn't get to downtown until they already couldn't get to downtown. And so some improved signage might be able to help folks find their way into downtown ahead of time upstream. Then in February was another virtual workshop providing kind of more summary information about the whole plan. Very similar to this presentation, in fact. A total of 57 community members attended. Being virtual, we definitely got a little bit better participation here. And there was a Q&A session afterwards. Some of the questions that were asked from the public were focused around funding and how to pay for improvements. There were a few questions around impacts to local residents and businesses. And then there were even a suggestion or two about ways to perhaps leverage Trip to Green traffic to the benefit of the city. So some general good dialogue and questions in the February workshop. So where do we go from here? The draft document's out for review until March 24th. So we're looking to get feedback, comments, suggestions on the draft document. As Rebecca said, it's available on the website. And the final plan should be wrapped up in April. And the study team is looking for direction on how to proceed after that. We kind of mentioned the 4 steps and the public feedback we've received on those 4 different avenues that could be taken. And whatever direction is taken needs to be coordinated with Caltrans and agency partners. So we've kind of done the body of work of these are the options. We've tested the Trip to Green. This is what the public thinks. We've worked with the agency partners. Now what? And that's kind of where the study is at this point. And we'll take any questions.
All right, thank you. And I know I want to thank you again for coming out tonight and doing this. We did think it was important to come out and highlight all of this one more time for the public. So with that, council members, any questions or comments?
I would just make a sort of comment or thought here. The primary issue I see us trying to solve in Placerville is the congestion on our city streets, not so much what's going on 50 or the congestion on 50. And, currently some people get off because of the length of time it takes to get through the lights. I think if you implement a toll, even as you stated, some people will get off because they don't want to pay the toll. So I don't see that as a solution to our problem. It might be a solution to a problem, but not the problem that we're trying to solve here in Placerville for our residents. So that's just a comment or a thought.
Agreed. Yes, Mr. Clarici.
Yes, that's an excellent point. And it's funny because we've gone out and we did go talk to some folks about Trip to Green, and I have talked to folks, merchants and the like, on Trip to Green, and I mentioned this at the Transportation Commission meeting, but I'll do it for the benefit of the folks here, and that is, if you lived on the, once again, right, that traffic that goes down the freeway, they go down the freeway, but there are some interesting things that I learned that I will share here in a moment. If you talk to folks that live out on Clay Street and that part of the world on Coleman, and I know folks that live out there, and we actually have someone that lives very close to there, they said Trip to Green was great because all those people that used to go drive up and down Clay Street weren't there. It all but eliminated that traffic because why? I mean, except if you live out there, there's no reason to go there if you're driving through Placerville. So, you know, I think people should just remember that this part of this effort is because folks in town, and not just Clay Street, other folks in other neighborhoods came to this when I was on the council before, and this one, the previous one, and this one, and said, hey, we have a problem in our communities. It's not safe. It messes things up, and we would like a resolution. So that's kind of where all this started from. But if you lived on the south side of the highway like I do, or you live on the north side of the highway, I think you experience Trip to Green significantly differently. I'm only saying this because I think it's something that we need to consider if we decide to move ahead with a form of Trip to Green in the future, that the north side and the south side are significantly different experiences. And so just taking that into account. And I had always been sort of the mind that that traffic that was going through town on the freeway coming from the east literally just wanted to get through town. But I did talk to several merchants, a couple of restaurant owners and other just shop owners that said that when Trip to Green happened, especially on the October date, they saw a significant loss of their business. And they said the same story. And this is, once again, this doesn't mean that we don't do Trip to Green, but we have to think about this. And literally it was, there are folks that come off the highway. I mean, I think the vast majority of the traffic going through town goes through town. They just go through town and they're not stopping. But there's enough marginal amount of traffic that does get off, stops. They've been in traffic for a while. They stop. They're not happy. They're tired. They stop. They get an early dinner. They do shop. They do walk around. And it was more than I had thought that there would be. So I learned a few things. And we need to, there's just a lot of devils in the details on how we want to do this. I will come straight up and say I am not in favor of tolling anything. I think it'll just create a nightmare that nobody can. The other thing is nobody wants that giant edifice to transportation running up and down the highway called an overpass. For one thing, it would be really expensive. And the funny thing is we would be implementing Trip to Green while we were waiting to raise $200 or $300 million to actually, if we ever decided to do it. So I think there's certain things, as I sit here, one voice of five, that we should probably start to just sort of peel away as we move forward, and I'll make comments on the draft, and those will be some of my comments. So there are other things, but I'm curious what my cohorts up here say and what folks out there say.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Clarici. Any other comments? I mean, I will say I agree with both of those comments. I think, and you're both absolutely right. I mean, one of the reasons why we first started this was the people on Clay, and I mean, even I've said people will follow me home because they think I know a shortcut, but I'm just going to my driveway, which is kind of great because then they don't know where to go after that, and so they end up on Highway 49. So, you know, it did change that. And I will say, like, from my own personal experience, it did take me a little bit longer to get downtown because I had to go around. I used Coleman to kind of go around what we're trying to stop people to do. But in this case, it was just all local traffic, people on the north side of town that were trying to get around. So maybe it was 5 minutes longer potentially because maybe I hit 2 lights or something to that effect versus just one going across. So I do think increased education, signage, all things that we can potentially do better in order to let people know how to get around town. And we're never going to get it completely correct. There's always going to be somebody that didn't see it in the paper or didn't see a sign out or something else. So you're going to get sort of a constant criticism regardless of, you could have banners flying on airplanes, and you're still going to get somebody that doesn't quite pick up the message about what's going on on a given weekend. So, I'll take some of that in the context. But I do agree. I mean, I think, and that was good information to know in terms of, because I had the same feeling, which was, if people want to stop, they're going to stop. But to the extent that there are people that maybe just give up and want to stop for an hour to get lunch because they're just fed up with the traffic, and that's had a real effect on some businesses, then that's something we need to look at. That shouldn't be discounted. So, and again, I don't like to get sort of tunnel vision on this as well, which is Main Street, but there's also the other side of town, there's Broadway. So I know, and again, I'll use my own personal experience. I don't like to go like Tractor Store on a Sunday after like 8 a.m. because then I'm stuck, and I don't want to be stuck up for 20 minutes to get back to my house. And so I do avoid the other side of town. And so there's also that element of those businesses being affected, not just Main Street, not Broadway. So I think we have to look at it holistically as well as we're looking at this, is how does it affect businesses and operations across town, not just on Main Street. So my comments for now. Vice Mayor.
I'll just not repeat what you guys said, but when I looked at the results and the people who were happy and the people who weren't happy, if you live south of 50, you could move around again. I mean, my husband and I, 3-day weekends, we just pack up the house and we don't leave because it's such a hassle to move anywhere. But if you look at the results, a lot of the people who said it took us longer, we weren't happy with that, live just north of 50. So they're used to shooting across the freeway and having access to town and Main Street where they had to go out and around. And like you said, they may not have known the fastest, easiest way. So it was much more of a hassle for the people who lived north of 50 to get around, although some people were happy that their roads weren't clogged on Clay Street and Coleman and whatnot. So just a lot to consider, as well as I always like to think about back to the Caldor fire. When we had this available to us, we were able to move traffic through town when we absolutely needed to, and don't want to forget that, for those emergency purposes, they served us well also.
Basically, when it comes to a lot of what I dealt with, because I do live on Clay Coleman on top of Lincoln, to John's effect, the city actually put up signs that says no left turn between noon and 6 on Saturday and Sundays. And when they implemented that, it was actually just prior to Trip to Green. And they eliminated a lot of that traffic by parking a police officer up the top of the hill for 3 days. And everybody got their warning, including the residents in the area. So Lincoln Alley got used a lot more when it came to that part. And you're correct. I mean, the north side to the south side, I can literally go down Lincoln Alley, come underneath, the highway, and I'm in downtown in 2 seconds. So for us, it's a little different. When it comes to some of the older people in my area, though, I did experience them just not wanting to leave because they were too confused on getting around. So that is some of the things. I also had the comments from the businessmen that, we lost some money during some of this stuff. So we definitely have to take that into consideration, because now we're talking about up to 12 holidays possibly of implementing this. That is a good revenue loss when it comes to our downtown businesses, especially during the holidays. Even though we have people that come down here for the holidays and want to come to downtown and all that, how much of those people are actually stopping because they want to, compared to how many are stopping because, we're just tired of the traffic, we're going to stop. So I think we got a can of worms no matter which way we go. So we just got a lot of consideration we got to make.
Yeah. I'd like to add one more thing. There were merchants on Main Street that said that for their businesses, it was better. The Trip to Green was better because they were not all, but some of them were appointment-driven businesses. And so it was easier for people that had an appointment like at 3 to go to their business on Main Street. So it wasn't all one way. And then a lot of people said they didn't really notice any difference at all. But in deference to the ones that did, and these are people that I know well and respect, they said, no, it was definitely a challenge, and we need to recognize it. So it's a thing. But up on Broadway especially, when it gets all clogged up, there's one pizza person up there that doesn't do deliveries on certain days because they can't get their vehicles off of Broadway. And so it's funny, if you're shopping and you can do like where we live, you can go up Broadway, hit Broadway, do your shop. You can go to the Tractor Supply. Yeah. Very good store, by the way. But then you can just keep driving up and around an airport road and come down, and lo and behold, we're home. But if you don't have that option, it's a problem. So anyway, lots to consider. Anyway.
But not on 3.
Not
No, it's, a challenge nonetheless. All right. Well, again, thank you for the presentation, and we're going to go ahead and take public comments, and then may call you back up if we have anything we want to clarify. Thank you again. So with that, I will go ahead and open up any public comments on item 6.3.
Ruth Michelson, downtown merchant. So I was at the middle meeting that was held in this room, and I really don't recall anyone being for a toll. The report was that it was mixed. I could have missed something, but I'm going to concur with all of you. It seems like a non-starter, and just as you've all said, a toll, hey, it's so easy if you're talking from Placerville Drive to Mosquito. We all know ways to get around that in both directions, and it'll just cause more clogging, like you've said. The other thing I want to mention is, as a merchant, Main Street becomes a parking lot. And that's not with people who are stopping to buy. That's one of the other ways that they get off of 50. I mean, we know there's just a lot of, and that kills business. So that's something else to consider with this, especially if you do a toll. They'll find their way. We all know our ways, and they'll find their way with their little gizmos, their phone gizmos, the Google Maps and such. The other thing I wanted to mention that disappointed me when I came to the middle meeting was with the 4 options that were given, and there was pros and cons to each. There was not one mention of merchant business. And yes, I heard what you said, Councilmember Clarici. I also have a lot of contact with my merchant community. Sunday afternoon was killed in downtown because people could not figure out how to get off up at Mosquito. I know each time Engineer Neves improved the signage, but it had to be bigger, further back. People are careening around the corner, and then all of a sudden that's where they're supposed to get off. So it was dead on Sunday afternoons for most of us in the downtown because they didn't realize, okay, there was another option at Placerville Drive, but most people don't want to backtrack. They say, forget it, we're going to go home. And what was the other thing? Let's see, about merchants. Yeah, I'm not even sure why the consultant is still talking about tolls. That seems like just a retread that I would like us to drop and not have them spend time on talking about tolls. And it seems like that idea of we have to do something. There's no question, and I guess that idea of bringing down the barricades. Although, let me tell you, they're going to be people are going to run through them. But that seems like the best option. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Good evening, Brian Carter. I just had a couple questions that actually came up as I was sitting here listening to your conversation. Thank you for mentioning the mapping apps, because that's one thing I thought immediately about during this conversation. Mapping apps are, I'm sure, the vast majority of the people that are going to the Clay Street side of things, because nobody outside of town knows how to get around. There are illegal turns now, and I don't know if Google, Apple, if they take into account those illegal turns, if that's part of their mapping software. And if it is not, is there a way for the city to contact them and let them know about those illegal turns, which would eliminate the vast majority of those drivers, because then it wouldn't even be an option in those driving apps. Also, one number that I have not heard yet is the permanent infrastructure without the tolling infrastructure, without the gantries, without the tolling infrastructure. What would that number be? 16 million minus whatever the tolling infrastructure is. I'd like to know that number. I think that would be informative because nobody wants to toll that I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot of people about it. And another thing about the mapping apps, guess what they take you around? Tolls. specifically, they avoid tolls. And so that is going to create a huge traffic issue getting around the tolls that we are trying to pay for this infrastructure with. Also, I am disappointed not to hear from the merchants again. I understand there's been a lot of issues getting responses, but I was really looking forward to another update and hopefully get some merchant responses, but I didn't see any in my perusing. I think that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ryan.
Sue Rodman, Placerville resident, and I live on the north side of Highway 50. And I liked Trip to Green because I could get to Main Street and I could go the full length of Main Street and I could shop on those weekends. Where when we didn't have Trip to Green, it was a parking lot. And you couldn't go anywhere and there were no parking places. And you just avoided going downtown, period. And I don't think it mattered that much which side of the freeway you lived on, other than having people drive by your house. Since mine doesn't go anywhere, they didn't drive by my house. And the mapping apps will avoid tolls. So a toll is a non-starter. We need to just kill that one right now. Be done with it. And the other question I have to you is the weekday population for employees approximately doubles to triples the population of Placerville. So when you're looking at that and you're comparing Thursdays to Sundays and you're not taking into account all of your employee traffic, that throws kind of a monkey wrench in your analysis there. You need to look at the fact that you have a lot of people who work in Placerville who do not live in Placerville who make a daily trip here. Now, to make them pay a toll would be just horrendous. That's just absolutely no. But so how did you account for weekday employees versus weekend recreation trips? Because when I see your presentation, it doesn't look like that is accounted for at all. And I think that I liked Trip to Green. I think that having the little railroad arms come down is a pretty good solution. And that for having it only happen 3 times this last year doesn't give people enough experience with it to adjust their habits and how they get around. And like he said, especially for older folks who aren't used to figuring out traffic anyway, that becomes a problem. But if they have more experience with it, they start to learn. And as far as having people get off on Mosquito Road, that's a bad exit anyway. They should be getting them off up at Snell School instead. That's a much better exit. It's got a longer lead time, a better so for people who want to come to Placerville, get them off at Snell School. Don't wait until Mosquito, because that is a nasty exit anyway. So those are my comments. I like it. I think that it is, I have always said, when people ask me, where are you from? When I go to places in South Lake Tahoe or further down the hill, and they'd say, where are you from? I'd say, I'm from Placerville. And they'd say, where's Placerville? Have you ever gone up to South Lake Tahoe? Oh, yeah. Do you remember the 3 fatal stoplights on the way there? Oh, yeah. I said, that's Placerville.
It's true. You're not wrong about that at all.
Ruth Carter, resident of Placerville. The tolls, I think everybody is on the same page. They just don't make any sense for our town, for our city. One good point that Ruth had actually reminded me of is that did the consultant actually talk about having the option for the eastbound traffic to have the ability to turn left when they were coming back that direction? Oh, I'm sorry, westbound to turn left. So that was another consideration to modifying the Trip to Green. I would like to know what the gantries are going to be without the tolls. I think that seems like the most viable option in terms of long-term infrastructure with a low construction impact and a lower cost. And why don't we talk about maybe some things that we can do within our community to raise some of these funds if it's not as expensive as putting in all of these tolling apparatuses. So I'd like to know what that cost is. Is that something that's feasible? Maybe we can figure something out within the community in terms of some fundraisers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Kirk Smith. Mayor, you're right. No matter what you do, somebody's going to complain, and that's true. But we do have an obligation to do what we can to mitigate the impact that's adverse to the people of Placerville, because that's the obligation all of us have. Our concern shouldn't be to help promote the businesses that the Chamber wants to promote at Lake Tahoe, Apple Hill, or the wineries. We want people, when they're coming through, to stop off here. If you come down to Placerville from off of Placerville Drive, the sign said Historic Downtown Placerville. If you come up the other way, it says Placerville Main Street. Which, as a tourist, would you find more attractive that would encourage you to turn off? And why would you put a sign right there just before Missouri Flat when you don't possibly have time to turn unless you're in the right lane and you know that sign's going to be there? There's no reason you can't have a bunch of signs all the way up, and there are other ways to turn off onto Main Street. Councilmember Carucci is right. We've all done so far just informal surveys. We know the reaction is mixed, but for some businesses, it's devastating. And that's something that we really need to look at specifics for downtown instead of some generalities. That needs to be examined because we've learned, I hope, some problems in this kind of data where we say the number of respondents tell us, yeah, so what? There's a lot of reasons people don't respond, so it's not an accurate representation of some of the constituents that really count, like the people who generate some, albeit modest, sales tax revenue. Again, I think that we should work towards making historic downtown Placerville a destination point rather than simply a place you stop for gas and fuel on the way up the hill. And again, I know we have other business districts, but if you go to Napa, Monterey, or any of those other places of destinations, and you stay overnight, you're going to stop at Target and other places along the way. And you're going to order pizza up the street and all kinds of things. So other people do benefit from making Main Street a point of destination. And you certainly pay a lot of money to the Chamber to promote us, so hopefully they will do that. I think it needs a lot more study to focus on making sure that the impact on Main Street and in turn Placerville is helped. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirk. Okay, any more public comments? Mr. Barton.
Hi, good evening, council members. Jerry Barton, El Dorado County Transportation Commission. Mostly just wanted to come up and express some gratitude. Appreciate all the hard work of Rebecca Neves, city engineer, and the council members, in particular, former council member Kara Taylor, who's out there on 100-degree plus today, talking to merchants about Trip to Green, and our law enforcement professionals who met with us several times in advance of launching this pilot. This is definitely a very out-of-the-box project, and I want to express appreciation also to the citizens of Placerville who tolerated it, and that everybody was able to make it through town safely. So some important acknowledgments along those lines, and then also those who spent their time coming to the meetings and completing the surveys and that type of thing. So also want to mention the project did win an award. It's Innovative Project of the Year by Women's Transportation Seminar, and much of that to the involvement of some of the female project team members, including Rebecca Neves. So big congratulations there. So again, just at a bigger level, this is a really innovative, out-of-the-box project, and the fact that this city was able to pull that off is really an excellent thing. So thanks to everyone. Thanks for the comments and participation.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the council staff. I think, Rebecca, you might have had a couple of comments just listening to public comment here.
Yeah, I do, actually. A couple of things, if I could clarify, wanted to really extend my gratitude actually to council members Clarici and Vice Mayor No for walking with me in the end of January on Main Street for us to attempt to solicit more responses to our merchant survey. So we actually did float the merchant survey for nearly 8 weeks, and at that time we got to a point where we didn't even have I think we had 5 responses. So one comment or concern was how that stuff wasn't daylighted during the second meeting. Well, the second meeting occurred on January 19th, and we closed the survey on the 31st. And I will say we went from 5 to 20 responses after we had walked Main Street. So it was just really tough getting folks to respond. But some of the highlights that we did hear back was that 60% of the respondents saw either no difference or that it was better in their business, and so we took that to heart. There were some restaurants in that. And then 77% from that merchant survey said that they would support some form of Trip to Green either in the future or during Main Street events. And it does include considering modifications related to the days and timing. We definitely heard that back, and that was great feedback. That was the whole point why we did this pilot project. We were taken out for a test spin and see how it does. So that was good to know. The other thing, too, I kind of wanted to touch on, and I apologize, it was a little fuzzy with the presentation. We're all really looking forward to the audiovisual upgrade. It's coming. It's like starting this week. But one thing I did want to draw some attention to that was highlighted on the slides was that during the weekdays, it was 91% was not city residents. And then weekends, it was 93% were not city residents. But when you get into the actual truncated data of that information, it came out to be not only did you have those 90% numbers, but 88% of the traffic on weekdays isn't even in the county. It doesn't even originate from El Dorado County. So we did take that kind of into consideration, obviously, when we were looking at how we can implement some form of a project. The biggest challenge with doing a permanent Trip to Green project, and I actually, really have to agree with Ms. Michelson, is that people will run through the barricades and they will run through anything else that we put out there, including hydraulic bollards. The original intent of looking at possibly tolling a facility was to put some maintenance money towards it, because we are well aware that if we do this permanent Trip to Green project, other than the pedestrian overcrossing that we be proposed at Canal Street, we will be replacing crossing arms, we will be replacing bollards. And so it really was that form of a mechanism. And when we looked at that, I'm a county resident. I certainly don't want to pay a toll either. However, there are examples, and we actually found 11 across the country that have local resident exemptions. And that was something that we had daylighted to at that other meeting. Not that we go that route, but I just want to have that information in the middle of the table that is not an uncommon practice to allow for some local exemptions or significant reductions. And then, what else? One thing I do want to highlight, one of my blessed duties as a city engineer is I receive all the accident data reports from the police department on a regular basis, and they do a phenomenal job. And the part that I couldn't help but notice was that for the first time in my 8 years being here, we didn't have a single accident on Highway 50 Labor Day weekend. And that brought joy to my heart because it's always a rough situation. It just turns traffic jams into so much worse. And, there was definitely some delays. We did address additional signage. There are improvements that we can certainly do, but I do want to highlight the fact that, we actually had our only change order was to add more signage on the project. I think it was for like $7,300 that was approved by City Council on December 13th. So we did try to, and I really appreciated the merchants because they actually said, hey, we need this, this, and this. And I really appreciated the merchants because they provided some really great feedback on that, and that's what ultimately generated the signs. And so, but there's always room for improvement. And that's the thing too, is I so appreciate all this input, all these comments, because this is going to make whatever we do better or whatever we don't do better. So just those were kind of coming to mind. That's it.
Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate that. Councilmember Carici, you had a
Yeah, I have a question. I have a question.
Sure.
We heard this I heard this when I was talking to folks on Main Street and just folks, and then it came up here again, and this idea that, well, why can you just not do trip to green in one direction and do it in the other, and the challenge, well, there's probably a whole bunch of safety reasons why you can't. And then it was mentioned, I believe, at the podium, well, can you allow lefties? I guess for the westbound traffic, could you allow lefties? The challenge would be because the left turn pockets are not long, and if they started to go out into the free-flowing traffic, you could have a real safety problem. I think the idea of getting people into town off the highway lies in signage and experience. We did this for 3 days. Even if I lived at the corner of Canal and Highway 50 on the north side, I'd be really not a happy person. There's no way you can make that person happy, and they shouldn't be happy. We've cut their freeway off from them. But I have a sneaking feeling that if we were to do this more, folks would figure out the traffic patterns. They'd understand those things. And that might even happen with that traffic coming through, the tourist traffic coming through town, if with good signage. And then after so many times you're doing this, the people that want to stop in town would go, hey, I want to stop in town. I need to get off on this. A certain amount of it is just muscle memory from that. But there's some really good reasons why you can't have it in one direction and not the other besides and they're all safety related, from my perspective. Do you have a comment?
For what it's worth, when we do the permanent trip to green, or however the direction of the council proceeds, we have looked at how we could improve sight distance at Canal Street that could potentially allow for the right in, right out. Yeah. So getting to Main Street rather than going across the freeway, they would make a right at Canal. They would take the Placerville Drive off-ramp. If they're heading the westbound direction, they would take a right at Canal, Placerville Drive off-ramp, go underneath the freeway, and they're on Main Street.
Yeah. That's what I was wondering.
Okay, thank you. And there was a question on cost, and I know this would probably be just top of mind or back of a paper thing, but if we didn't have the gantries for the tolling,
yes,
I'm thinking it's still like, instead of 16 million, it's like 15,250,000.
So I did do a quick little search on the cost of gantries, and it is around $1.5 million per gantry, which translates to $3 million. We have 16.5 as the estimate, so you're at 13.5 million. Tolling revenue is estimated around 1.2 to 1.6, so they pay for themselves within 2 years, and then the rest just directly goes into a maintenance funding source.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Sure.
Oh, Mr. Barton. Oh, sorry. There you go.
Hi, Jerry Barton, El Dorado County Transportation Commission. Just wanted, since we're talking a little bit about the gantries and that type of thing, I do want to mention that we did give some thought to the locations of the gantry in relation to people going around them and potentially clogging local streets, because that's obviously we knew that going into this that the trips around the stoplights were a huge problem in Placerville, and particularly for myself. I live, in Placerville, right off Cedar Ravine, so I experienced that congestion myself. So we didn't want to make that problem worse by not placing the gantries in the right location. So we talked about putting them far enough to the west that it would maybe even be beyond Missouri Flat Road, and then on the eastbound side, or rather on the westbound side, to the east of town, it would be past Point View Drive. So they would already pay a toll long before they got into the city of Placerville, or they would have to take a very circuitous route around town. So that I did want to mention just for your information, and of course, this was a pretty high level study when it comes to tolling, and so we would definitely need to look at that a lot more closely. And then there were some questions about the permanent infrastructure trip to green. And that cost was estimated at approximately 16 to 25 million. Those are pretty round numbers right now, but Rebecca could speak to that a little more as well. But those were the numbers that we had come up with for that permanent infrastructure.
Thank you.
Oh, The way you were looking, you looked very thoughtful there.
Okay.
Just all the time. I'm not a fan of the toll idea. I think it's more headache than it's worth. It's hard to explain to the community. It's hard to think about. It makes my head hurt. On the other hand, if you've just put down, like you're driving a Tahoe, and your room costs you $300, and your food's going to cost you that much money, and the whole trip on a weekend's probably well north of several $1,000s for a family. Are you really going to cut out a town for $2 on a toll? Now, some people do crazy things. Drivers do crazy things, but there's a lot of evidence that if the toll is low enough, they'll blow right through it in a heartbeat because they want to get to their vacation and not, or even Apple Hill for that matter. And that $2 will, no. And these are people coming from like Sacramento, the Bay Area, where, a $2 toll would actually be a huge reduction in what they usually pay to drive around in a toll road. So anyway, I'm not discounting the concerns about tolls and their impacts on the community, but on the other hand, there's a lot of science and there's a lot of data around this stuff on the transportation side. I still don't like the idea, but
Yes, Vice Mayor.
Well, just to that point, imagine if you live in Pollock Pines or Camino and you're not considered a local. You come down the hill for almost everything. Have you been out on that freeway? How many people come down just for work, even if they don't live in the city of Placerville, and they go twice a day? Yeah.
yes, it would be unneighborly.
Unneighborly.
It would be definitely would be a task. I think we'd all would want to see a lot of data, a lot of concrete examples of how locals are exempted and how that works. Because to your point, if you're in Camino or even Cameron Park, and you're coming to work at Marshall Hospital. There's just there's a lot of things that would go into that would make it very unpopular, not including our own residents.
So I'll just, because we had a little sidebar here, but one of the things is the numbers did say 88% is not from El Dorado County. So I guess one thought process there is exempt all of El Dorado County.
And you get an exemption.
Yeah. No, exactly. That would be the easiest way. Would
Yeah.
be just to exempt
And if I
all.
may, that was actually something we did float at the January workshop as well.
All right. Any other comments, questions, ponderings? All right. Well, again, want to thank EDCTC, consultants, Rebecca, the staff, everybody that's helped, that's walked, that's talked to people, to the public, that's given us a lot of feedback. All of this helps, and it's not none of these are easy decisions to make. There will be things that people don't like. But I also think that doing nothing isn't an option either. We should be looking at, unless something is going to make the thing worse. But I don't know that that's the case in this regard. But we will make sure that that's not the case. So in any event, to be continued, we have the calendar. And again, we appreciate all the feedback. If you have more, please email us, send us, call us, and we will take all of that into consideration. So thank you, everybody. Okay. We're going to go ahead and move on to item 7, which is the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion by roll call vote unless any member of the council wishes to remove an item for discussion. And so I will go ahead and open up. Is there any item that anybody wants to move? Okay, if not, I will go ahead and open up the consent calendar for public comment. All right, seeing none, I will close public comment on consent and bring it back to council.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, we have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
Councilmember Gottberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Yarbrough?
Aye.
Vice Mayor No?
Aye.
Mayor Saragosa?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to go ahead and move along to public comment. These are on non-agendized items. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the council on any matter not on the agenda, and that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city council. And the mayor reserves the right to limit the speaker's time to 3 minutes. So at this point, We will go ahead and open up public comment, item 8.1, for anyone who wishes to address the council.
Hi, I'm Paul Kojala, resident of the city. Thanks for all your guys' service. I know it's a thankless job, everything you do, and especially all of you people that have to deal with all of us that don't know what we're doing. We have to ask you guys questions all the time. I have a special needs daughter, and I bought her a little house in the historic district, and it's on Cedar Ravine. It's getting cleaned up right now. It's taking a while, but it will be really nice here shortly. My historic review is up soon, so I should be able to move forward with getting it nice. But is what I'm here about is that, and I think it's a great idea to put a bike trail and a sidewalk along Cedar Ravine. It's needed. My issue is Darlington and Gurley don't drain well because the piping is way undersized along there, and then that floods 6 of our backyards all the time. And it's not just on, I know on New Year's Eve it was a special day, but it actually happened on the 14th of January again. Not as bad, but it still happens. And so if I protect my property and push it around my property, it's just going to hit the Clements and Kara's house, and it's no good. And then Haley's driveway continues to get washed out. And any decent storm, about 1.5 inches of rain, it puddles up and overflows into our property significantly. And there's not a whole lot I can do about protecting my driveway. I have drainage set up on the driveway to, collect the water that would be collected on my driveway, but not for a 1/4 mile worth of road that comes down and floods our area. So I'm just asking that for help, because obviously it's a much bigger thing that I can do to correct, and I don't want to just keep pushing water into other people's yards. But before we do the Cedar Ravine project, that this gets taken care of as well. And it's pretty easy. You just add a few more drains and upsize the main drain from the bottom of the hill into the creek, which will then be underground anyways. So any direction or where you need to point me to get this done, I'd greatly appreciate it, because the last thing I want is that creek to get closed in, and then there's nowhere for that water to go, and having flood insurance isn't really an answer for that, because that's for the creek cresting every 10 years or whatever, not for drainage, because the city didn't plan properly when they built a bunch of roads. So I'm open for any suggestions or any help to do with that. I didn't get this on the agenda. I will do that in the future if I have to. But so that's where I'm at.
Thank you. We'll hang in there. We'll address this after public comments are finished. Thank you.
Hi, Ruth Michelson. I had, I think, 4 things to mention. 2 of them had to do with the last meeting in this room, city council meetings. One had to do with the way that you handled the farmers market. It doesn't personally, I like the community aspect as far as my business. I don't think it makes any difference that it was there at the bell tower and now that it's moved. So it's not like I've got money in the game, okay? But my concern is a Brown Act concern. My concern is that you had 4 options on the agenda. And then Councilmember Clarici came up with the Mooney lot. Okay, not on the agenda. And those merchants weren't noticed. Residents weren't noticed, and I don't even think the organizers were noticed. And y'all decided, yeah, let's move it to the Mooney lot. And I think there's an issue there. And I think you're probably going to get a cure and correct letter. Not from me. I'm not a city resident. I can't send you that. But I just want you to be aware. I think you should tighten things up a little bit. That's my opinion. Your council may say something different. The other had to do with when you talked about 525 Main. And in the staff report, I don't have the numbers memorized, but ketchup and mustard, 487 to 489. It was all tied into the staff report and how everything would be interacting with one another. And then when it came time to vote, I believe Councilmember No said, well, let's be clear here, we're only voting on 525. As far as the dollar rent and fixing the roof for $37,000 and such. but I'm just not so clear that's really what you were voting on, because staff report really tied a lot of other things in. I could be wrong. So now on to a more upbeat and positive thing in my 53 seconds. So I'm a very active merchant. I organize with the gallery next to me the third Saturday Art Walk for every month. And the other thing I'm very active in is the Golden History Days, which is what is concurrent with Wagon Train. And that's coming up June 10th this year. And we plan on, and we work very closely with Terry Zeller. We have a monthly meeting with him. He's very helpful to our committee. We have a large committee of about 10. And what I just wanted to let you know about is that we're having a little wine mixer to let everyone know about the event this Sunday. I have invitations. I'll give them to Regina, and she can pass them off to you. So thank you very much. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Ruth.
I was prepared to say something positive and upbeat, but it turns out to be a dissenting view to what you've just heard, because I wanted to commend all of you for the way you handled the downtown farmers market last time. It was wonderful to see all kinds of thoughtful comments from all of you, very well reasoned, and I think the suggestion from John Clarici was a very wise one. Once you put that topic on the agenda, it does not cement you into doing what is proposed by staff. It's not in concrete. But it was well reasoned, and it provides what's a perfect solution in my view. Again, there are people who are it's a matter of inertia. Once you've been doing something one way for a long time, it's hard to switch gears. But that location has plenty of parking. And years ago, I went knocking on doors and asked every merchant in the area what they thought of the farmers market that was there on Saturday. All of them were supportive, including one who did not get any direct commercial benefit, and that was the person who has the yarn store, because it's a real special niche. But she loved it because it added to the quality of life. Every other business had increased business on Saturdays. And now what that one location has, instead of knitting goods, is a unique market on Main, and they're thrilled with it. First of all, it's not going to be in competition, because when you have a bunch of foodies across the street, they're going to give you more business. I was excited to find out they have chimichurri, which is the only place around that has it, and I think that's one of the examples of how it can tie in to what's across the street. So you're going to have more business there. It's good for the community, and everybody should be pleased. It's just that, once again, if you're locked into one position, you've been doing it the same thing for year after year after year, you're going to feel, again, it's inertia or maybe a sense of entitlement. But I really appreciated watching each of you give some very thoughtful comments, so I commend you.
All right. Thank you, Kirk.
Ruth Carter, City of Placerville. Also regarding the farmers market, realizing that there's other discussions and feasibility research being done by staff, that I'm going to leave that location topic off the table. But I did want to bring attention to something that had been part of the discussion, and that is that the farmers market is not all tomatoes and cucumbers and peaches and fruits and vegetables. So I'd just like to read a little bit about a farmer's market. A farmer's market artisan is a person who creates handmade, high quality, and often unique products that are sold at the farmer's markets. These products can include items such as handmade soaps, candles, pottery, jewelry, textiles, and other crafts. Farmers market artisans are often skilled in traditional techniques and use high quality materials to create their products. Artisans usually use traditional methods and high-quality and many are small business owners who rely on farmers markets as a way to sell their goods and connect with customers directly. In addition to selling their products, farmers market artisans often have a strong commitment to sustainability, using locally sourced and organic materials whenever possible. Examples of artisanal crafts commonly found at the farmers markets include woodworking and glass blowing and jewelry. There's all kinds of things. They are often sold alongside other locally sourced products like produce, baked goods, and meats. The focus on the handmade and locally produced goods at farmers markets reflects a growing interest in supporting small-scale producers and preserving traditional crafts and techniques. It also provides an opportunity for consumers to connect directly with the artisans who create these unique products. My point is that although not every item being sold at the farmers market is a fruit or a vegetable, that doesn't mean that it doesn't come from our county and that it doesn't support agriculture. And El Dorado County is agriculture. We need to be continuing to support that community of agriculture in El Dorado County. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Sue Rodman, I am a supporter of farmers markets. I am really happy to see the decision that you made last time to move the farmers market up to the Mooney lot. I think that was a brilliant inspiration from Councilmember Clerici. It's a great location. It's one that I can support, and I can go ahead and go there, where I could not go to the Wednesday market. I avoided Wednesday downtown, period, because I felt that it was unsafe. And you had people standing outside the barricades in the traffic lanes. And it was, I thought, and the parking garage was just, you couldn't get in there. Or you could get in and go all the way out and back onto 50, but you could not find a place to park unless you could do the stairs from the third level, which is mostly leased parking. And since I can't do those stairs anymore, I'm pretty much limited to, if I can't find a place on the ground floor, I'm out. And there were no parking places along Main Street, where if we have it at the Mooney lot, you have the Ivy House right across the street, you have parking along the street. It'll be easy, and I'm looking forward to it. So I think that was a great decision and showed some creativity in the city council, which you should be applauded for. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Ryan Carter. No offense to your brilliance, Councilman Clerici. Just a quick point that Mr. Zeller in that meeting did describe the Mooney lot as the least desirable parking lot in the city for a farmer's market. So, just wanted to point that out. I did review the video, but it was a good suggestion. But it was the least desirable lot in the city for a farmer's market. So, thank you. On Main Street. Sorry, not in the city. Sorry.
All right. Any other public comments? Going once? All right. Sold. We're going to go ahead and close public comments. I think, Rebecca, I know there's already been some conversations going back and forth on Darlington and those areas. I don't know if you wanted to make a couple of quick comments there.
Yeah, so I just, first of all, I really wanted to thank Paul for being here. He also was one of, I think, 3 public members we've ever had attend the Measure HL meeting. So I was really excited to see him at that, too, because we never get people. So that was very kind of him to take the time to do that. We did set up a meeting with the residents on Cedar Ravine who were affected by Darlington flooding on the 31st of December. And we were able to schedule a meeting on the 22nd, and unfortunately Paul wasn't able to make that. However, he did convey, he actually provided a list of questions to one of the other residents that did attend, who handed it off to me, and then I actually wrote it out in an email and gave some responses. But I do want to clarify a couple things. Yes, the storm that happened on the 31st of December was a 350-year storm. The other thing, too, is not to take light in that we have a FEMA map, a firm map, which is, flood insurance rate map. that was, developed in 1983 and looks like it may be due for an update, but it does identify, unfortunately, that whole run of Cedar Ravine is identified in a floodplain. So that part's a difficult thing to navigate. Once it gets that 100-year mark, that's, but not to be minimized, that there are things and opportunities that we could do on both Darlington and Gurley to make it better. Darlington, we already have a project for it. It's actually CIP 42219, and Gurley is being adopted as part of the CIPs this year. So we are looking at options for that. Ren, I had originally replied to the email to Paul on the 28th of February. I was looking at the schedules, and I thought, oh, Cedar Ravine's probably a little further along. It's got state funding tied to it now with that sustainability planning study. So that usually pushes local projects to move a little further. So we will look at some options in the next year or two for Darlington and what we can do. Specifically, we looked at the way that the hillside drains. And anything that we do on Cedar Ravine, if we consider boxing the culvert, we absolutely would do a hydraulics and hydrology study too. So just a couple of things on that. And then that was all I had. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, Mona, I don't know if you wanted to make a comment. I think there was a...
Yes, I would like to respond to the allegation of a Brown Act violation. We are not in violation of the Brown Act. In fact, Government Code Section 54954.2A describes how we comply with the Brown Act. Specifically, at least 72 hours before a regular agenda meeting, we have to post the agenda, and our requirement is to provide a brief description of the item in using at least 20 words. We have done that. We have complied. And any discussions, provided that we remain on topic within that scope, complies. So I'm confident that we did not violate the Brown Act.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to item 8.2, which is any written communication this evening.
No, Mr. Mayor, we didn't receive any. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. No, there's no items pulled from consent, no ordinance, no public hearings. We have a lot of, we have 9 items, but why don't we go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and then we'll go ahead and start our journey through items 12.1 through 12.9. All right, well, let's go ahead and start back up here. Thank you, everybody. On items 12, discussion and action items, and item 12.1, and that's to adopt a resolution approving and affirming amendment number 3 to the employment agreement with Cleve Morris, our city manager, for deferred compensation contributions equal to 5% of base salary, effective March 4th. And I know this was the item that we all lost power on 2 weeks ago during the snowstorm, and so we didn't finish it, and so we're redoing this. So sorry, Cleve, we didn't get to your item last week to finish. Mother Nature again got in the way, but again, I just want to kind of set the table a bit here, and just to say that Cleve's done an absolutely phenomenal job leading the city, leading staff, and really helping set the stage for where we're at as a city. I think, from retaining people, I always say we punch above our weight, and a lot of that goes to the fact of Cleve and the people under him and his leadership. And this is something that we've been trying to do for many years, and then we just had, whether it was, COVID or other things, it was, there were times when it wasn't, going to be the right time to do it. And so now we'd like to step forward and do this for Cleve, compensate him for the job that he's doing in a way that makes sense. And so I just wanted to kind of lay that groundwork. I know I did that before, but wanted to just restate it. And then wanted to have Dave just kind of go over some of the financials on it.
Thank you, Mayor Saragosa, members of the council. So the proposed Internal Revenue Code 457B contributions are similar to a 401k in the private sector, whereby contributions are made on a pre-tax basis. The city has 2 existing IRC Section 457 plans. One plan is with CalPERS, and the other is with Mission Square Retirement. If approved, Mr. Morris will have the option of depositing the deferred compensation contributions into one of the two plans. It's important to note that these contributions would not be credible towards Mr. Morris's pension. If approved, the contributions would begin March 4th retrospectively. As a matter of fact, I would recommend your action be made with retroactivity because that date, originally it was before the or after the council meeting, now it's or before, now it's after. Prospectively on a 5% of Mr. Morris's base salary. The projected cost between March 4th and June 30th of this fiscal year is $3,073. The $3,073 projected cost was not included in the budget. However, due to partial position vacancy within the administration department, the $3,073 cost would be absorbed within the administration budget. The annual cost is $9,399. If approved, staff will incorporate the $9,399 cost into the fiscal year 23-24 operating budget. In order to formalize this action, the council would need to approve a third amendment to Mr. Morris's employment agreement. With that, staff respectfully requests the council to adopt the resolution retroactively approving the amendment number 3 to the employment agreement with Mr. Morris, which provides the city paid IRC section 457B deferred contributions equal to 5% of base salary effective March 4th, 2023, and authorizing the mayor to execute the scheme. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Any questions? I know we went through this once, but any new ones? All right. We'll go ahead and open up this item to the public. Part 2.
Congratulations, Cleve. So that's this. Since it's going to be like a 401k, I'm assuming this has some basis, and that we offer this to other employees too, based on their performance evaluations.
We'll answer that at the end, Sue.
Yeah, but that's on. If we don't, maybe we should think about it, because we've got some very outstanding people who work for our city. And I think Cleve is one of those and certainly deserves this. Oh, thank you.
Kirk Smith. Well, I gave it some thought, and I can't recall, not much, but I gave it some thought, and I can't remember anybody I've met who was an administrator or manager who did a better job and more efficiently than Cleve Morris. And when it comes to juggling things in the air, he just seems to do it all very gracefully. And I know that there have been a couple times when I've suggested that, given a couple policies of the city, I'd rather he wasn't as effective. But we can't have it all. And lastly, I think there were a couple people who suggested he was worth his weight in gold. So I did some basic calculations on current market values. That'd be $4,672,000, and I do draw the line there. So thank you.
Thank you, Kirk.
And that would really mess up his PERS. That would really mess up that.
I think so.
That was clever. Good evening, Ryan Carter. Cleve, I just want to start by thanking you for your service. You're accessible, you're reasonable, you're responsive, your passion for the city is obvious, and you're just an all-around really nice guy. You're easy to talk to even when we disagree. You're smart, but you don't use your knowledge as a weapon. In other words, you don't talk down to us. Use your knowledge to reasonably argue your opinion. And in my experience, that is very rare with government executives. So I just wanted to express my appreciation and my support for this, and thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the council.
I wanted to just address Sue's comment to a point that I felt that part of the reason we were doing this is because this position has been underpaid for a good long time. And this was part of our way of, figuring out how we could compensate him, but not bumping his salary, so that you have doing all the things that you don't like to do. That being said, Cleve has done just a phenomenal job, as you said, for many years for us, committed to us, stays with us, and underpaid the entire time, and we really appreciate you.
All right. I will entertain a motion.
Go ahead. I will move item 12.1.
I'll second that.
All right. We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clarici.
Aye.
Councilmember Gottberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Yarbrough.
Aye.
Vice Mayor No.
Aye.
Mayor Saragosa.
Aye. All right. Thank you. There's, sometimes items are really easy, and this one was really easy to do. So again, thank you, City Manager. Okay. Item 12.2. Adopt a resolution opposing initiative 21-0042A1, which is also known as the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act. Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have to admit I'm not completely the expert on this. This is not the first time this measure has come before the state, but it is before us again this year. It has also already qualified for 2024, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. Basically, what this would, as I was analyzing this, one of the things that I think I would start with is, if this were in place prior to us adopting Measure H and Measure L, they may have not passed. They may have been a lot more difficult to pass. They may have even been termed not legal to go through based on some of the interpretation of this law. And just a reminder that both of those measures have sunset clauses on them. I don't know if we will look to renew those, but there is a possibility for ongoing costs related to roads and pipes that never seem to end. So it may be much more difficult if this were to pass in the future to actually adopt a measure. So in a way, taking away our local control to determine whether or not we want to, I guess I'd say this, so we tax ourselves in order to pay for those improvements that we see that we need in our community. The other thing that it potentially addresses, and there's still a lot of interpretation going on with this, is fines for things like code enforcement, et cetera, and how those can be adopted and approved. It could limit what you can do related to those. There is a lot more information in here that I provided. They're basically been provided by the League of California Cities. This was also recommended to oppose by the League of California Cities. And so staff in our review of it and in discussions with the League are recommending that we adopt this resolution to oppose this measure that will be going on the ballot in 2024.
Yeah, and I'll give a little bit more color on this as well, and that is essentially you had, and I don't know the exact ballot measure, but you had a ballot measure in Los Angeles that a couple of developers hated, and it passed, and it has to do with some of the fees, which you just mentioned, that got built into that measure. And so in this 2024 measure that's been put on the ballot by CBRT, California Business Roundtable, you actually have retroactivity in it. So it goes back to 2022 to actually undo, because that's the main motivating factor on this issue is really to do away with those 2022 measures. The other part of it is just really the dressing that you put on it to make it more amenable. A lot of times you have this idea of, do you have a single issue initiative? And I do think this one will probably be caught up in courts if it were to pass for whatever reason, because you probably have a single issue problem with this, as well as the retroactivity language that's within it. And so it's problematic from that standpoint as well. Every single, whether it's CSAC, the counties, RCRC, contract cities, League of California Cities, the Orange County Association of Cities, pretty much every local government agency has come out against this as a coalition, and individual cities are also, and counties are taking these votes as well. But just wanted to provide that extra context for folks as well. So with that, is there any questions or comments from anyone else? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and open up item 12.2 for public comment. Go ahead, Sue, sorry.
Sue Rodman, member of the Measure H, Measure L committee, and as I look at this thing, it seems to me that under our Constitution, we have the right of initiative. And this basically takes it away so that the taxpayers can't decide what they are willing to pay taxed on. So I do believe that Measure H and Measure L, and probably Measure J, would have a problem. And the problem is that the citizens are supposed to have the right of redress of their government. And if that means we need to do an initiative to have the government spend our money on what we want them to spend our money on, that is a right that should not be taken away. And to me, that is exactly what this does, is take that right away. So I think absolutely we need to oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Good evening, Ryan Carter. I'm going to take a opposing view on this one. As a small L libertarian, I love this bill. Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act, the actual name matches the bill, which almost never happens in this state. Usually you have a pretty deceiving name, but I did a really deep dive. I read the entire text of the bill. So I'm just going to go through a couple of things here on the staff report and see if I can make some sense of this. I'm going to disagree with Ms. Rodman. All this does is make it more difficult for government to grow, which is by its nature what government does. This raises the bar from a simple majority to a 2/3 majority for governments to raise taxes on us. So this, I take issue with the background, which is taken directly from the Cal City's description, that this is an anti-local control measure that will decimate vital local and state services to the benefit of wealthy corporations. I also take issue with the fact that this is supported solely by wealthy corporations. It says it's supported by labor, education, and infrastructure advocates. In other words, unions, unions, and unions. This background that was taken directly out of Cal City's summary plays a little fast and loose with the facts. It's a little deceiving. I'm going to take umbrage with their analysis. Just a couple quick things. Government is not for profit. This bill would require that all fees and charges not exceed the actual cost of providing the product or service for which the fee is charged. Once again, government is not for profit. That's wonderful. This requires fees and charges paid for the use of local and state government property and the amount paid to purchase or rent government property be reasonable. I don't see what's wrong with that. That sounds amazing as a taxpayer. It also requires all taxes to have sunsets, including state taxes, not just us, which our H&L already have sunsets. And there's some other things, and all state taxes require majority voter approval, so it can't be done directly through the legislature. All wonderful. Example of Placerville's affected fees and charges include the recently adopted banner fee. I see that's on there. I thought that we raised the banner fee to exactly what the vendor was charging, which I think is the spirit of exactly what this bill is. We're not making a profit on the fees we're charging citizens. The Measure H&L, yeah, it'll be more difficult to get them to pass again. If this goes through, we will have to exceed that 2/3 majority if we decide to re-up it. That will be a very tough hurdle to cross, but if we can't market the successes enough for the population that they will get over that hump, then maybe it's not what we need, the route we need to be going. Anyway, I encourage the council to do a deep dive on this if you haven't already done so. And before we as a city just pass judgment on it, I question many of the conclusions from Cal Cities. This is not time sensitive. You don't have to act on this right now. Don't sign on to it until you have all the facts. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no further comments, I'll go ahead and close public comment And actually, it does raise the threshold to 2/3, but it's actually for citizens-led initiatives. So right now, if we were to put a ballot initiative on the ballot as a city council, it would be 2/3 anyways. This would change it from if the public wanted to put an initiative on the ballot and take it from a 50 plus 1 to a 2/3. It used to be that way. Then there was a court ruling that changed that. So that would change back citizens-led initiatives to 2/3. If we put it on, it would still be 2/3. Just wanted to make that clarification. Okay. Any other comments or ideas on this one?
Well, I think that if you're going to change the law and the way this thing suggests that they should have to pass a 2/3 vote, if you're going to do that. But that's not the law. You could get 50 plus 1, and that would change the law for everybody. I think it's interesting. It always interests me that conservative organizations, and there's a lot that the Round Table does, it's actually pretty good. But I always like how they love local control until times when locals actually try to control themselves, and then they come rolling in. This is just a patently, as you pointed out, this has to do with Los Angeles. This has nothing to do with the rest of this state. And this has to do with that. And I read it. I read the whole thing. I've read the analysis. We had a nice little chat about it this morning, in fact, because I know he's more connected to this stuff than I am. And I think opposing this thing is the right thing to do. And if they want to come up here and convince El Dorado County to change its way of voting, then they should try to do that and not try to do it from L.A.
I would just also say I'm opposed to it. I think anything that takes away, as Sue Rodman pointed out, I mean, you're talking about citizen-led initiatives here, so you're making it more difficult for the people to create a change, which I think the people should have that ability. So I'm definitely opposed to it.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, I will entertain a motion on this item.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. No further comments. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
Councilmember Gottberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Yarbrough?
Aye.
Vice Mayor No?
Aye.
Mayor Saragosa?
Aye. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Cleve, for that one as well. Item 12.3. Confirm and recommend appointments to the Measure H&L Sales Tax Committee and the Placerville Economic Advisory Committee. And Ms. O'Connell has this report for us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Earlier this year, Vice Mayor No and Councilmember Yarbrough were selected by the Mayor to serve on the City Council Interview Subcommittee for the purpose of interviewing and selecting applicants for the various city committees. An application period opened for several seats on the Measures H&L Sales Tax Committee and the Placerville Economic Advisory Committee, and fortunately, the city received a sufficient number of qualified applications to effectively fill each vacant seat. For this reason, the subcommittee chose not to conduct interviews as they were already familiar with the applicants, which consisted of current incumbents, actively engaged members of the public, and one retired former city council member. In your staff report, you'll find the subcommittee's proposed appointments for these two committees, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to help answer them for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Or if you want to, Jackie, you want to give any other comments on this?
No, I'm happy to answer any questions. We didn't eliminate anybody. Everybody who applied is on there, so.
That makes it easy. All right. Okay, then we will go ahead. We'll open up item 12.3 for any public comment.
Sue Rodman, Measure H&L Committee, and I'm very happy with the appointments that are made, and I really applaud the decision or the recommendation to add a fourth, to go ahead and add that fourth person as a, as an alternate. When we had the Measure H&L Committee before and had an alternate position, it was very helpful. And the person who was an alternate learned a lot and became when one of the council members moved and was out of the committee, became a regular committee member, and gave him the whole background, so he was able to slide right in. And when someone has to be absent, then we still have a full committee. So I think this is a good way to go. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Seeing no further comments, we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring this back to the council.
I just want to make one clarifying statement. I said everyone who applied got a position. That's not correct. Some people who applied were not eligible because they didn't live in the city limits.
Okay.
So
Understood.
It's amazing.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, so do we actually need we have to confirm these appointments,
Yes,
right?
we do. I move that we confirm.
All right.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? All right. That's great. Am I good with that? I don't have to do a roll call?
As long as the minutes reflect it's unanimous, we're good.
All right, cool. Perfect. All right, thank you. All right, so moving on to item 12.4, and that is to acknowledge and file the fiscal year 2022-2023 mid-year budget report. And Dave has this for us tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So tonight's report is designed to answer two primary questions. The first is, how is the local economy doing? And we'll review the local economic indicators. And also, is the city living within its means? And we'll evaluate the general fund budget as well as your other operating funds. Jumping right into your 2022 regional unemployment rates, Placerville outperformed all of its regional competitors when you look at the last 12 months. And that's fairly unusual. In past years, we've kind of lagged. You know, we've kind of proportionally went along, but we're always just a little bit higher, but we were actually lower. So in January of last year, the state, for example, started out at 5.5%. They ended at 3.7. We started at 4.2 in January and ended at 2.6, which means everyone in anybody that wants to work is working, and there was jobs for them. So that was as of December. And then looking at Placerville's unemployment rates over the last 5 years, you can see that we've made big progress since the pandemic, which the second quarter of 2020, you can see it actually peaked at 12%, and again at the end of 2022, 2.6%. Transitioning to residential real estate sales in the greater Placerville area, things have cooled down. It actually, when you look at each month, it actually over the last 12 months, sales were lower during that period for the entire 12-month period. And overall, the volume in 2021 was 516 sales. In 2022, it was 264, so about half. However, when you look at the prices, they're still maintaining fairly well. However, 8 out of the 12 months in 2022 prices were slightly lower. So things are cooling down. Now, one of the things that tilted up our economy was folks moving from the high-density areas of California to the foothills, and that we actually had an increase in sales during the pandemic because thankfully, COVID numbers were lower and the restrictions were lower too, so that helped us through that period. Now I'm going to transition to recreation program attendance and ask Community Services Director Terry Zeller to review those numbers for you.
Thank you, Dave. On these two slides, the thing to notice is that all of our statistics point to a recovery of our attendance in programs from coming out of COVID, except for a couple of exceptions. The lap swim numbers were down, our pool rentals, and also our special interest classes, which are still behind historical attendance. But I did want to mention on those, and that's a lot of things like our yoga and a lot of our other classes that happen at this building. Our special interest classes are actually continuing to increase this spring, and thanks to the good work of our rec coordinator, Julie Burnsides, she's doing a wonderful job of nurturing those classes and instructors. So we're going to see continued strong numbers and expansion of those programs. On the second slide, The thing to note here is that we did have increases in our softball teams, showing some recovery over the previous year. And also the youth basketball numbers, even though it's a spring sport, we do take our fees before December, and you can see that the youth basketball went from 0 to 586 teams total, and so our youth basketball rebounded. So did you see what I did there? And so that's it for recreation programs. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Terry. And now moving on to development fees, I'll hand it over to Development Services Director Pierre Rivas to review those.
Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This first slide is showing the building division activity. Basically, we have two columns or two rows showing the construction permits and plan check fees. And if you go all the way to the far right, you can see it's quite a jump in our fees that we're projecting to collect by the end of the 22-23 fiscal year. And that's primarily due to two very large projects, that being the Mallard and Middletown affordable housing projects. Turning to the next slide, you can see the issued building permits. It's sort of been leveling off over the past few fiscal years. And so this sort of gives you the overall picture of the overall activity within the department as far as building permit activity. It's been fairly constant. Despite the ups and downs of the economy, we're still maintaining a fairly busy workload. Turning to the building valuations, once again, you can see the spike in that last column there. And again, the valuations are due to the Mallard and Middletown apartments. Those two projects alone total $32 million out of that projected $50 million for next fiscal year. So turning to the next page, planning and zoning revenue. Again, you can see in fiscal year 21-22, we did fairly well because we had some large planning projects that went through. Primarily that was the Mackinac Hotel. That's the hotel that's out in the Smith Flat area. Since the planning and zoning fees are, again, based on evaluation, very, very large valuation for that project. So that accounted for $75,000 of that fee. So where the fiscal year 22-23, it's a little more leveled off to about $30,000. So we're still doing fairly well, and we're also anticipating some additional large projects coming forward. Turning to the next page, this is just showing you the activity of single-family dwellings. And you can see we see spikes at different times. Typically that's because of a subdivision or larger development where a number of homes are being built at a frequent basis rather than just your lot-by-lot basis. So for fiscal year 22-23, we're projecting maybe at least another 6 houses. But I think for this coming fiscal year, 23-24, we can probably expect to see more single-family dwellings built once we are able to final and see construction of homes within some of our, let's just say, our dormant subdivisions, such as Cottonwood 4 and 6, Estonia. And we're looking at maybe seeing some activity on Quartz Mountain, which is really good to see. So maybe we'll start seeing some increases in single-family dwellings built in the near future. So turning to impact fees, you can see where water didn't have much of an impact, primarily because those large projects are served by El Dorado Irrigation District. However, the sewer fees we collect because we provide the sewer for those large projects. So again, you see that large spike in fees due to primarily the Mallard and Middletown apartments that we anticipate they will be completed and should receive they should be issued the building permit no later than June of this year. So they were included in this fiscal year's mid-year budget. Traffic and park, sort of the same situation. Traffic, again, we have a large spike in fees collected, the same with park fees, and those fees are collected on a per unit basis. And so when you're building a large apartment that's 70 to 80 plus units, then the fees we collect are commensurate with that number of units. And any questions on these? Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. And now moving on to encroachment permits and transportation permits. I'll hand it over to City Engineer Neves to cover those items.
Thank you. So as far as, advance the slide, sorry. Thank you. So as far as encroachment permits go, you'll notice here we took a big increase right around 2019 and then into 2020, and where that kind of stemmed from was the November 2018 campfire in Paradise. And what we're seeing, this huge increase of permits is a response to maintaining electrical facilities within the community by PG&E. However, we are getting now to a point where PG&E is actually starting to catch up on that workload, and that's where you'll start to see some of those permits being further reduced. Veg Management has made significant progress as far as their facilities throughout town, and we are also seeing smaller and more localized work also starting to taper off a little bit. But roughly we're actually in the same neighborhood as we were this time last year with the permits we've received to date. And that is, it's kind of also an indicator that maybe perhaps as it was last year, that once the weather starts to clear up, we could see a jump in permits as well. Next slide, please. This is related to our transportation permit fees, which is kind of a good gauge to see what kind of goods and service movement we have throughout and around town. We are at or around the same amount as we were this time last year as well. But, the steady increase since the drop in 2020, we're still not quite there yet. We're not back to 2019 numbers, but this is a good gauge to kind of see where some of those numbers are coming in. And again, the numbers that we have for 2022, which was, significantly higher than obviously in 2020, we still have the potential to reach that high of a number. And that's all.
Thanks, Rebecca. Moving on to sales tax, your Bradley Burns sales tax, which is your general fund sales tax, is your most significant local economic indicator. It represents 60.18% of your general fund. In 2021, you had strong per capita sales tax at $605 per head. Placerville was ranked 32 out of 539 cities, and we hope to be number one someday. Things are cooling down a little bit. The quarter ending September 2020 decreased for that quarter year over year by $5,826 or 0.3%, pretty flat. When you exclude adjustments, it was 0.2, not much change there. $3,618, again, a flat return on that quarter. The state overall was 8%. One thing I want to emphasize based on HDL's analysis is that the inland cities and agencies are recovered first through the pandemic, and the coastal cities are still recovering. So they're still seeing a resurgence of sales tax, and that's where a lot of that 8% comes from. It's not that we're just not doing as well, it's just a timing issue, I think, overall. Looking at who contributes your sales tax, you can see those percentages there. They're about the same as compared to this time last year. It is important to notice that the state county pool, that's mostly the county pool, your online sales tax makes up about 24.7% of all your sales tax, and then autos and transportation, 26%. Building and construction, 17, or about 2/3 overall in those three categories. And that's important when you look at this slide, which shows the growth by category. And you can see that autos actually slipped a little bit. It dropped 6.35%. Building construction, though, continued to show an increase at 3.14%. And then all the way across to the very right, you can see state and county pool slightly less as people transition from online to brick and mortar. It dropped 2.43%. And then we have winners and losers in between. Not a lot of change there. And then we appreciate all of our businesses, especially our top 25 businesses. And slight difference since the last quarter. So Big Five is back on the list. Marathon, which is a new name for that gas station. Sierra Nevada Tires back on the list. And then Grocery Outlet, Hangtown Fuel Stop, and Placerville 76 dropped off. They're still pretty large contributors. They're just not in the top 25. So, and then looking at your growth since 2013-14, you can see in the red that's actually cash by year forecasted for 22-23. The blue bar indicates annual inflation, so we deflate those dollars by the annual CPI rate, and then cumulative is cumulative inflation for that period between 2013 and 2023, and you can see that when you take the cumulative, you're at about 2018-19 level sales tax. So $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. Sales taxes for 2021-22 was almost $6.7 million. We forecast this fiscal year at about $6.7 million, or about $58,000, or 0.87%, pretty flat. And that's based on HDL's forecast, by the way. This just shows you the rate of increase or decrease, and you can see that the little blue tablets, or tabs at the bottom, that's this fiscal year, not much change compared to, we've had some pretty large growth rates over the last 3 years. So, and then your budget you adopted in June 2022, it totaled $23,422,000. Your general fund portion of that was $10,986,000. It did restore all the pre-pandemic service levels. It did include a $75,000 contingency. And since then, you've approved $127,000 in general fund budget revisions, and those are listed there. The biggest one being the City Hall backup generator, $87,000. This shows you a general fund dollar and how it's allocated. Currently, so 33 cents for the police department, 27 cents community services, 9 cents non-departmental, things like audit, animal services, those kind of things. Administration, 8 cents, public works, 7, development services, 8, finance, 4, engineering, 3, and the city council, 1. You're very affordable. Thank you.
You get all this. You get all this for 1 penny.
1 penny.
Just saying.
It's quite a value. This just kind of shows you proportionally your revenue versus your costs. So when you compare, say, your sales tax, it's about comparable to your community services and police department. It's just kind of a way of looking at your budget. And then your revised budget with those changes we talked about, revenues, $11,007,857, forecast $12,149,753, and we'll get into the details of what that is. But we're actually, I was mentioning to Mr. Morris, I thought this year's report would show a little bit of growth, but not that significant. So we're feeling quite blessed. About $1,141,000, or 10% over budget. That's a good thing. And then expenditures. We budgeted $10,854,000. We're forecasting $10,687,000, or $166,000 below budget in the right direction. So we had a forecasted revised budget with $106,000 deficit. However, it's a planned use of fund balance from last year. We forecast a $1.2 million surplus going into by the end of this fiscal year. And kind of drilling down into the revenues, we talked about sales tax, about $132,000 difference between budget and forecast. All other taxes, that's your property tax, your transient occupancy tax, business license, all your franchise fees, electric, cable, garbage, your real estate transfer tax, and your cannabis tax, which a lot of this, between TOT growing back and then also the cannabis growing nicely, that didn't sound right, the cannabis revenue growing nicely, 11.83%. And then Mr. Rivas spoke about the 2 apartment complexes, the Middletown and the Mallard. That's primarily why they were up building permit wise about almost close to budget, and then you add those 2. And we did talk long and hard about receiving those fees. We haven't yet, but by June 30th, we anticipate receiving those fees. And it's important to note that those fees are being paid for by grants that you approved, so we know the money's there. So we feel pretty confident that money. We usually, big projects like that, we don't like counting on them until we get the cash, but these are kind of unique. We anticipate fully that we'll receive it. So really blows that budget out, $296,000 over budget. Intergovernmental revenue. is primarily vehicle license fees, and that is higher than expected based on the county's projections. Charges for services, recreation fees, development fees, again, that's over budget primarily because of the Mallard Middletown Road projects. Fines and forfeitures slightly lower for vehicle code fines in other areas. Use of money and property slightly above $70,413. That's primarily due to, again, cannabis, the community benefit fee that we get on a quarterly basis that we estimated pretty low, and that came in higher. And then other financing sources, that's your overhead to your water sewer funds. So again, 1.1 million over budget, or 10.37%. And then on the expenditure side of the ledger, you can see that each department, other than, well, non-departmental, are actually below budget, and that's primarily due to position vacancies, personnel vacancies in each department, and that varies from department to department. The reason why the non-departmental is over budget is because the League of California Cities tells us we're going to get less gas tax. We transfer in our gas tax for road maintenance, and that is going to be about $37,000 lower than what we budgeted. And then other costs are higher, about $45,000. So that's where that $82,000 difference comes from. So again, $166,000 below budget overall. So in doing these calculations, we assume pay-as-you-go for your OPEB or your other post-employment benefits for retiree health, and there's no contributions for future costs other than the actual premium. We did assume expending the entire $75,000 contingency, and the $1.2 million forecast is primarily due to $755,000 in additional development fees, which are a one-time source, and then $298,000 in additional taxes and franchise fees. And looking at your historical performance, the blue is revenue and the red is expenditures, and you can see we had some pretty, especially considering we were in a pandemic, in 2019-20, we had a $760,000 surplus. Fiscal year 21-22, a $1.9 million forecast, and then again we're estimating a $1.2 million forecast. So it gives you an opportunity to build up your reserves for the rainy day, maybe get some projects done. We can talk more about that when we have our budget workshops this spring, or sooner if you like. So Water Enterprise Fund, overall doing good. Our service fees are up slightly by about almost $10,000. Expenditures, $74,000 less because of vacancies. We anticipate $64,000 surplus that would go right into your fund balance for projects. Sewer Enterprise Fund, similar story. Now, as Mr. Rivas pointed out, we will receive impact fees for the Mallard and Middletown apartments. So a good portion of that $993,000 increase, or 13.98%, is because of the apartment projects, as well as service fees doing well. And then expenditures are actually $236,000 less, and that's because of position vacancies. So it's important to note that each year since 2018, we transfer in Measure H into the Sewer Enterprise Fund for debt coverage purposes. We have to show 120% debt coverage for our bonds, and then we spend that money out of that fund for sewer projects. So your adopted budget assumed $868,000 in net revenues for sewer capital projects. We now have our forecast a little over $2 million for sewer projects and reserves based on our forecast. So the non-major funds, I won't go through all of these unless you have any questions. These are our smaller funds. One thing I want to point out, Measure J, last year had a great year. It was the first time it actually had a surplus in many years. We anticipate a deficit this year of about $61,000, and that does assume transferring in $144,000 as budgeted from the general fund. And then we have the new ABC APP grant and the OTS STEP grant. Those were new this year. You adopted budgets for those mid-year. and then all your other non-major funds there. And then in total for your operating, again, this doesn't include your CIP budget, but when you look at your budget overall, your operating budget, what it takes to run the city, your revised revenue budget, $27,665,000, forecast $29,762,000, or a little over $2 million, about 2.1 or 7.58%. Expenditures, 23.6, forecast 23.03, or $600,000 below budget, or 2.54%. So overall, we're looking at about almost $2.7 million in additional funds for reserves and projects. So in closing, although the local economy shows signs of cooling, active development and CIP projects, and we do have some larger capital projects coming in. I know Ms. Neves has covered those in the past and will in the future, but those things between our development projects will help stimulate the economy and get us through with this slower patch we're kind of in. And then City Council and management continue to operate the city in a prudent and responsible manner. It's anticipated year-end operating revenues will exceed operating expenditures for most funds, and staff will provide another update to the City Council at your May 11th budget workshop. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any comments. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Certainly good news, where we could have certainly had a lot different scenario play out for us. Questions or comments? I have just one, and it goes back to the sales tax that comes from essentially use tax from whether it's Amazon or online purchases, and that whole deal of where it's located and how that money gets divided back out to counties and municipalities. Did that ever is that still an ongoing fight, or did the department of whatever the new tax department's called figure it out?
Yeah, the way the law is written, excuse me, the way the rules are written, that for online sales, if they have their own warehouse and they sell goods from that warehouse to us, what they call a fulfillment center, then the agency that houses that fulfillment center gets the sales tax. And that was the change you're referring to. I think it was as of December 31st, 2019. So we were receiving some fulfillment sales tax up until that point, or use tax. But after that, it changed to where the local agency that houses that fulfillment center or centers gets the sales tax. And that is something that is of question. I know a lot of cities have concerns. If you have a fulfillment center in your backyard, you're happy. If you don't, you're crying in your beer. So that's something that I know is being looked at by the league. However, our online sales tax has done well. Our percentage, we get 25% of the county's use tax. So it doesn't matter if you live in Cameron Park or Diamond Springs. If you buy something in El Dorado County, we get about 20% of that of the action. So.
Gotcha. Okay, good to know. Yeah, and I think, 'cause I want to say I've seen legislation around this item that's out there trying to, I guess, claw some of this back into other municipalities that don't have a
I'm glad to
fulfillment
hear that,
center.
because it's an issue. Yeah.
Got it. One comment I guess I had for my colleagues is, with this funds, this is certainly not the sexiest of ideas, but certainly one that I think future councils will hopefully look kindly upon, and that would be to continue to pay down our CalPERS debt. I know we've done some front loading on that already, but would love to look at that again to see what options might exist to continue to whittle at that and to take some of that burden off for future generations as we move forward. I know there's plenty of things that we need to do here and now, but I also want to look forward too. So just as something to throw it out as an idea. Any other comments? If not, I'll go ahead and open up this item for public comment.
through Rodman, Placerville, Measure H and Measure L, and I'm very grateful to have Dave as our staff person for Measure H, Measure L. He keeps us well informed, and I'm really grateful to see our city running in the black. We don't have to worry about being Silicon Valley Bank.
This is true. Let's hope then we don't want to be. All right, seeing no further comments, we'll bring this back to the council. There's no action on this item. It is a file, acknowledge and file. So again, Dave, thank you for all the hard work. Thank you for keeping us on a fiscally conservative path. And thank this council and people that preceded us as well for not spending on programs that we can't afford to do long term as we go forward. So this is good, all good news. So again, thank you.
Thank you. It's a team effort.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and move on to item 12.5, and that's to review the requested use of the bell tower area by the El Dorado Cougar Band for their annual fundraiser known as Taste of Maine. And Mr. Zeller has this report for us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So last spring, in 2022, the City Council reviewed an agenda item for this event that was to be held on April 30th of 2022 around the bell tower. And just to give a little bit of background, this is an annual Cougar Band fundraiser for the high school, and it also partners with Main Street restaurants and businesses in the downtown area. So it's a win-win for the event in general. And also for many years prior to the last few, this event was held at the high school on campus in their amphitheater. So at this meeting, Council approved the Taste on Main event, but they did put a requirement that the west lane along the bell tower in front of Sourdough and the parking structure remain open, so not to compromise the circulation since it was a weekend. The council had also had some discussions during this agenda item in general about the bell tower, its utility as an event location, practicality of closing it, and continuation of the farmers market around the bell tower was discussed, and then also whether the bell tower area should continue to be used anytime that Main Street remains open. So this year, this agenda item has come back because we received a request from the El Dorado High School Band to hold another Taste on Main event. This one is scheduled for May 6th. It's a Saturday. But this year, they're requesting that they go back to the setup that they had previously with closing Stagecoach Alley and the turn lane. The reason that they had stated was that there was a large amount of people that participated in the 2022 event, and also they felt it was a danger having an open lane directly next to so many people that were enjoying the band and participating in the event. So we've been looking at this request and reviewing how to best accommodate it if possible. And then, of course, we had the change in the February council meeting, which was to discontinue use of the bell tower for the Wednesday farmers market. And during that meeting, Vice Mayor No had also asked that we look at a policy for the bell tower specifically to be brought back. And staff understands that a more comprehensive policy for use of the bell tower area will need to be drafted and heard by the council apart from this request. So staff has reviewed the past events that have used the bell tower area, and really the only two repeating events that have had repetition with any continuance was this Taste on Main event and the Girls Night Out event. And that one is normally in September, and that helps fund Images of Hope in the Assistant League Sierra Foothills, at least it did last year. Both of these events are very popular, and they do attract large crowds, and both have voiced the concern of keeping the right turn lane open for the event setup. Correction on the staff report, I do have the Girls Night Out application also. It's not true that Taste on Main is the only current application requesting the bell tower. keeping the right lane open does provide much better flow and use of the parking garage during the weekend events, but staff agrees with the event representatives that the proximity of vehicles to participants could increase the likelihood of a safety issue, and that would be on both events. So the options that we're taking a look at would be approve the use of the bell tower area and uphold the current requirement to keep Stagecoach Alley and the right turn lane in front of Sourdough open. The other option is to approve the bell tower and allow for the closure of Stagecoach Alley and the use of the roadway for the event between Sourdough and the bell tower. Another option would be not to use the bell tower area for this event and direct staff to work with Taste on Main to find an alternative location. There are some costs. They were projected to be about $660 for 2 full-time maintenance workers, and this would be overtime due to a Saturday to set up the water barricades. And this would also require removal of those, so that's all calculated in there. And it's assumed that the cost would be absorbed by the general fund. So the recommendation that staff has is to provide the council options for the layout of the venue. And I believe we do have a representative of the Cougar Band here in the audience that can answer questions also, but I can take questions now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Terry. Appreciate that. Any questions at this point?
Yeah. I had a question. Can we have the students or the parents do the draining to reduce that $660 cost to half?
Yeah, we could probably have them participate, but then putting the barricades back is a little tricky sometimes in order to get them out of harm's way and away from folks that might want to use them for weird purposes. So we would still need some folks to collect those barricades since it is a weekend.
Okay.
Okay. We don't want weird things.
Weird things are bad. All right. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, why was the event moved from the high school to Main Street in 2022? What was the reason behind that request? And this might be more for the applicant when he comes up, but just wanted to put that out there.
I can take a stab at that, even though I wasn't here for that. I believe City Manager Morris had attended those events in the past and said that restaurants did participate in those events in the past, but they did bring their kitchen equipment and their prep equipment to the amphitheater area. And I believe the move to Main Street was to try to get a higher visibility and also to be in closer proximity to the restaurants.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right. Let's go ahead then and open up public comments. Thank you for being here tonight and for waiting to get to this item.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much. My name is Nate Gergich. I am the Cougar Band-Aid president. I never thought I'd say that in public forum. So it's okay. Laugh at my pain. Part of your, to get to the answer for your question is we wanted to become more incorporated with our town. We love Placerville. The Cougar Band, the Eldorado Band, is part of this town. It's part of, we march in the parades. We're here for the tree lightings. We love this town. And so the hope was to bring it downtown to actually make it more ingrained in our culture. And that's why we do it here. We can do it back at the school. The problem with it is that we're so off from the beaten path that we don't draw the people into the town, which draws a lot of the tourism, which draws a lot of the attraction into this beautiful place. And so that's part of it. So just to kind of give you some background, we have 90-some kids. We get $8,000 a year from the district to have this band program. It costs $30,000. And that's bare bones. That's getting kids back and forth. That's parents scraping and scheming to get our kids involved in this program. We have choir, we have band, we have percussion, we have marching band, we have concert band, jazz band. There's lots of band stuff. I was never a band player. My kids are. My daughter went through this. She's now at Cal Poly in her second year. She marches in their band. It is an awesome program that encourages kids not only to be involved, but to stay involved and do better things with their life. As you can tell, I'm kind of passionate about this thing. part of our concern last year specifically was we had Stagecoach open, and we had a couple of kids almost get tatered because they're in music world where there's unicorns and amazing things playing in the background. They're not watching for traffic. The other thing is I work in Sacramento. I'm a sergeant down there for Sacramento County Sheriff's Office. Our kids down there understand to look for cars. Our kids up here don't know what a car is. So they're not watching cross traffic, and that's not picking on them. That's just the fact of the matter that they're not smart savvy when it comes to those vehicle stuff. So they're doing something, they're distracted, and we've almost had we had about 7 kids get almost at different times tatered by a vehicle. So what we're asking for is just the closure for a couple hours, for about 6 hours. We will assist with working with the police department up here in making sure we have traffic flowing back and forth. We'll post people out there to make sure there's still flow going. We will do whatever possible. I will personally drain the barricades. We did that last year, and we stacked them all up neatly. We'll bring them back to the school and hide them so that there's no funny business. Yes. Weird stuff happening with those barricades. We understand that there are very limited in what they are, so we want to be an asset. We appreciate the city of Placerville. We appreciate our town. We're part of its culture. So we also see that there is a problem with closing that, and that does add complications. So we are sympathetic to that. Just tell us how we can work with you guys, please. And we'll give you all tickets. I don't know, whatever. I can't bribe a public official. It's cool. But no, we appreciate your guys' time, and we do appreciate the fact that you're even willing to listen to us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments.
I had another question. Can I ask?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Actually, if you want to, we have a question from a council member.
So one of the things you said was sort of you could have people there. I know one of my big concerns, I do a lot of work in roadways, just for your reference, and I've had several times where like vehicles have crashed into our work areas. It's the sort of partial street closure and the through traffic on Main Street, and that the people who are there don't really know how to be safe, right? So like people on our job sites, they're all trained. They know not to lean up against barricades or walk, on the street side next to the barricade, which obviously if there's a collision could cause a problem. So I guess one of my questions is, could we potentially have people there on site or, your organization and folks that sort of know the safety aspects and would be telling people like, hey, no, don't walk there. You need to stay on the other side of the barricade, or some way to keep that safer, particularly with all the high school kids that, as you pointed out, are not necessarily always paying the best attention.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We have a lot of parents that volunteer. That is one of our best attended events. We can put people on safety. That's literally their job, is to tell people to get back. That's not a problem. To make this event possible, we will do whatever we possibly can to make it safe, because we want safety not only for the people that are there, but also the kids that are playing as well.
Yeah. Just kind of a piggyback question. It's kind of the same thing. When John and I went and talked to the businesses, everybody loves the band, wants to support the band, but some of the business had complaints about all the kids just loitering right in front of their door, right on the sidewalk, and we had talked about, a solution to that is having more parents help monitor that and kind of watch the kids. And so if we could do that both and keep Stagecoach Alley and keep them away from the businesses, I think it'd be another positive for us.
Yeah, absolutely. We're willing to work wherever.
No, and I just want to everybody to know, the business we talked to, everybody wanted to support the band. Mm-hmm. So band is big, and we like it.
Oh, no, my comment is just that most of you know, it is one of, besides having a family, I work with 3 other people, and we do the chains at the high school football games. So I get to listen to the band a lot, and it's a great thing. The energy, the kids, they play very well. And so anything we can do to help support this is a value to. And this is in our town. Mm-hmm. El Dorado High School is probably one of the oldest high schools in the state, if you consider this is the 14th oldest city in California. And it's actually been up on that location now. It'll be going on 100 years here in a few years. So anyway, if any way we can, because I've seen it, and go Cougars, go Cougar Band, I guess in this case.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We have any further public comment on this item?
I think having the band is a great idea, Sue Rodman. My daughter went to El Dorado High School and she was in choir. But this is only for one day. So just shut Stagecoach Alley for one day I don't see as being a huge problem, and I do see it as being a safety issue for the kids in the band and the people who want to come and support it. So, if we close it for one day, that's a whole different thing than closing it every week. So I think this is fine. I would say go ahead and let them do it, and I would go ahead and close Stagecoach Alley and that right turn lane. You can get along without that. And if you're a local and you're coming to support the band, you probably know how to do that. And so it's not the problem that it is when it's every Wednesday for the half of the day. So that's my input.
Offsite. Thank you, Sue. Any further comments on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the council for discussion.
I just thought of something on the parking side of this, because, a topic that we're not talking about right this minute, but the idea of the participants in the parking, but that's on a weekend. What's the least parking situation on the weekends? I should know the answer to this question.
The lease parking actually goes a week.
Okay.
However, I will note that City Hall is not open. We use a fairly large portion of the lease parking on the third floor of the garage. We initially looked at only doing it during weekdays, but many business owners are open on the weekends, so they need their lease parking on the weekends too. So there is a possibility that we could look at allowing some parking up there because of city employees that won't be there on the weekend. But
just to be
kind
fair,
of figure that out.
So maybe we could get like the not the patrons, not the people that come and enjoy the thing, but maybe the folks that are in support, have them park up on the third floor, so we don't have that. Because we should be intellectually honest on this subject and do that. So that's what I'm thinking.
So I'm just going to elaborate. I mean, I'm obviously, like I said, my biggest concern is really the safety and sort of people being unaware and not, doing things that are unsafe, where they're not, putting themselves at risk of being pinned between a barricade and a vehicle. It only takes one drunk or distracted driver to make that happen. No. Well, that too, I guess.
We'd like to think not.
So, I mean, I guess I definitely, if we're going to allow it, I think Stagecoach Alley should be closed, and that, I mean, I think that takes care of one of it. And I also would kind of want a requirement in there that there are some adults sort of manning the barricade on, Main Street and making sure people are not sitting on the barricade or walking around it on the street side, or kind of having some sort of safety control adults present, that's sort of their job, that are, volunteering from the high school to sort of make that a safe event. Because otherwise, I mean, my concerns were the same on the farmers market, right? It's really just sort of putting people at risk. So, I mean, they think this is a one-time event. I think if we can have those measures in place, we can kind of address it for a one-off event.
And then have an after-action report, so that we make sure that the parents did what they were doing and the parking didn't get gummed up, and some of the other issues. So we have that sort of way of checking on what the folks said they would do.
I'll disagree with that because, I mean, what I'm hearing is kids loitering out in Stagecoach Alley versus having parents just monitor them and do what they should in public. But I'm not going to fight you two guys because this is a one-time, one-thing deal, and we can talk about all the details later.
I mean, I think I'm good with closing the alley for this. I mean, I'd even be open to leaving the alley open and then doing the reverse traffic if we wanted to leave it open. But you'd have to have volunteers to move them through and back into the garage. Although that would just, I guess, be for people, needing to go to the pharmacy or something else. We could do something like that as well. But I do think, because I remember, I mean, there's a lot of kids. And so that whole area gets very filled. The one thing I would say, though, is if we could keep, the sidewalks free-flowing as much as possible so that the stores still have people that can get in and see them and all that good stuff. I think that would be helpful, and having the parents help us with that, I think, would certainly go a long way. And then having an after-action report and coming up with the policy, I think, going forward, how we do this, when we do this, and what it looks like, isn't then another conversation.
But it's a conversation we need to have, though, now. Not
Yes.
now, but like now. In the near future. Well, you know what I mean. In the near future, we need to have this conversation because you will, yes.
Yeah, because we're always going to get, people asking, and it's a great place to do things. It's not, that's a obvious thing. So we do have to have a policy. Cleve, were you going to?
Just that we are working on that report as we speak, and we will have that to you, if not at your next meeting, probably the meeting after that. So it's coming.
All right. Any other comments?
I would just throw one other thing out there because this was an idea that I had. But did we consider Benham Park? Because it's literally a one-block walk from Main Street, and the band could set up there. People could get all of their stuff from the shops. I know that the sort of wagon train did a thing like that last year. I went to that. I didn't think it was that bad. If you put some signs up and say, walk this way, it's a nice, big, open, shady spot. It's very safe. It's downtown, in the community downtown.
The Catholic Church parking lot right next across.
Yeah, so I don't know. That was the other thought that popped into my head. Again, my biggest issue really is just don't want to put anybody at risk. And I worked on a job site in Morgan Hill that was actually a similar setup to what we have here, where like the geometry is similar, and we did have somebody crash into our barricades on that job site. And so, my perspective maybe is a little different than some of the other folks on that kind of safety component of it.
Yeah, no, I'm interested to hear staff and the band to see what that idea. I mean, I don't understand how it works. I mean, is the band just there for entertainment? Or are they part of that Main Street businesses delivering? Or, I mean, how does this event work, really?
Oh, yeah, come on back up.
Do the people pick up the food from the Main Street businesses and then go to the event space from the restaurant? Like they pick up their food at the restaurant and then go, or does the restaurant bring the food to the event?
So what we do is the actual people get tickets and they go to the different places that host them. So they'll have say 8 or 9 tickets, depending, and some have alcohol tickets. They'll actually give those at the actual business, like the Bene or Cascadas. Any of those, they'll actually give the ticket, grab the food from there, and eat as they go to the next restaurant, and then they're listening to the band the whole time. So it's kind of like a progressive.
It's a movable feast.
Type of it's a mobile feast. Yes.
It's a movable.
So
where do the people eat?
Usually on the run, because they're trying to get to the next place. Because they go from the Italian place to Cascadas to Heyday, and so there's 9 or 10 restaurants that are participating. That they're actually listening to the band, which is kind of interesting that you have a band centrally located as they're walking around.
So the band sort of in that sense for people to hear it needs to be in a space on Main Street, whether that's
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay.
In the past, did we have seating before in the past for this event? Like, I remember, like a tent with seats.
So we have 2 tents that we usually have put up. They're the large, like, circus style tents that are put up for coverage because we do have people, and it's May, so depending on if we're going to get rain or if we're going to get blistering heat, we do have 2 tents that are set up. And also to touch on this too, I know overtime cost working for government is a thing. We can put up our own barricades if that helps. We could literally get the barricades the night before and help fill those things up. If that helps cut the cost down, because I know that that's an issue as well. We don't want to take advantage of the city for their good favor. So we can do whatever. So.
No, appreciate that. Any other questions for the applicant?
When are those tickets on sale? I'm hungry.
They're coming on sale in about a month.
About a month.
All right. Thank you.
I know.
All right. I mean, and again, I appreciate. I think we all appreciate the level of working with the city to try to make this happen, and we want to make sure that this happens in the right way as well. But I'll let the conversation continue.
I just want to comment quickly, and maybe Terry is going to, and maybe Nick's not here. Well, there he is. On the offer to
that was perfect.
Good timing. On the offer to help with the barricades, I do think we're going to need our 2 staff people to do that. However, if they wanted to offer a couple of people to assist that were supervised by our staff people, there is a real concern with the filling of those barricades. Moving them out there, not as much, but with the filling of the barricades, it's not something that we could turn over to them.
I would be willing, assuming I'm in town, to volunteer for that.
Yeah,
Can I do that, or are you going to sit there and go, no, we have...
Well, what I'm saying is there still have to be staff people there.
Yes, no, the 2 staff people, I understand, but we could...
Supervision.
I'm assuming, I'm looking at Terry and Nick, if we want to have some people assist with that, we probably could.
We'll have everyone sign a release.
There you go, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mona.
That would be possible to have helpers, and we have had folks help. We've had the farmers market people help in certain things too, but there are, we're dealing with fire hydrants and hundreds of pounds of water pressure, and so there's a concern for safety.
Thank you. All right. I don't usually do this, but I will, as mayor, I'll take a stab at a motion on this. And that is, I'll make a motion that we approve the use of the bell tower area and the closure of Stagecoach Alley for said event, and that the applicants provide volunteers to help with security, ensure crowd control, as well as to ensure that the sidewalks have free flow of movement.
And just for the record, this is actually subject to a special event permit, so the application needs to separately be approved. This is to get direction on the layout and the additional direction provided by council.
Understood. Including that that comment from city attorney.
I'll second the motion.
Second. You're just kind of basking in the glow.
All right, we have a first and a second. Any other comments on this item? If not, roll call, please.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
Councilmember Gottberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Yarbrough?
Aye.
Vice Mayor No?
Aye.
Mayor Saragosa?
Aye. All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate the comments. Appreciate your time tonight. We're looking forward to a really good event. Thank you. Yes, we will be definitely buying.
We will be buying
our tickets.
Yes. Yes.
All right, so item 12.6, approve a resolution approving the construction contract with Carnahan Electric in the amount of $37,619 to do retrofitting of LED lights at the Center Street parking structure. Approve $40,000 budget liquidation from the downtown parking fund for public parking rehabilitation project. approve $20,000 budget appropriation from the downtown parking fund contingency for unforeseen expenditures, and lastly, approve a $20,000 budget appropriation from the downtown parking fund unassigned fund balance for said project. And Mr. Zeller has this one for us as well.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As far as if you have questions about the funding, that's something that's in Dave's purview. But talking about the project, Center Street parking structure, if anybody's been there after the sun goes down, you know that there's a lot of lights that are out there. And so as a structure, it was not considered under the LED retrofit project that the city had undertaken in 2019, mostly because the lights are actually fluorescent lights, and so it didn't pencil out as far as the efficiency that was required under that loan program. But under that program, the city was able to put a timer on the lights that replaced and adjusted it to get more savings from the system. Under the discussion, due to these age of these fixtures, the pace of them burning out has increased, and it's most effective to perform a total replacement. The good news is that there is the existing housings, which are the bases that are screwed into the concrete, and the lenses are in good shape, and there is a retrofit bulb for LED that's more economical than replacing the fixture in total. We were able to get 2 bids. It was difficult to get a third. Weren't able to get a third, but we feel like the 2 bids that we have are good representations of a fair pricing. And Carnahan Electric was determined to be the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. So the quote really works out to about $313 per light. With the labor and the old bulb disposal versus, I think I was looking at $500 to $520 just for the fixtures alone, not including the labor. So the options for the council are to adopt the resolution approving the recommended actions or direct staff to take other actions. And like I said, our low bid is $37,619, and that is for all the lights. And as far as budget impact, we're looking at a $20,000 appropriation from the downtown parking fund contingency for unseen expenditures, and $20,000 appropriation from the unassigned fund balance for the $40,000. And so the proposed contract is within the $40,000 proposed budget, and I can take any questions.
All right, thank you, Terry. Any questions? All right, seeing none, any public comment? And I'll public comment.
Since we're down to one public commenter, Sue Rodman, burned out bulbs are really not a good look for the city. It's sort of like broken windows and boarded up things. You go into the parking garage and half the lights are burned out. It's not a good look. And doing all of them at the same time is a good idea, because once they start to fail, and they're failing at an accelerated rate, the best thing to do is just do it all at once. And you're probably actually going to cost you less to do it that way than if you do it one at a time as they burn out. We do need to maintain our parking garage. It is one of those things that people remember from coming to Placerville. And I'd like to know, will we see any energy savings from going to LEDs? It seems to me like we should, especially if we got, the difference between fluorescence and LEDs is not great, but by the time you replace that many, it seems like we should get some efficiency savings there. So I think it's a go.
Thank you, Sue. All right, I will close public comment. All right, I'll bring it back to the council.
I move that we adopt a resolution per the staff report.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
All right, first and a second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
Councilmember Gottberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Yarbrough?
Aye.
Vice Mayor No?
Aye.
Mayor Saragosa?
Aye. All right, thank you, Terry, for the report.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Item 12.7. Approve a $619,931 budget appropriation from the Highway Bridge Program for the Placerville Drive Hangtown Creek Bridge Replacement Project, and authorize staff to issue notice to proceed to number 4 in the amount of $663,193 with DeBerry Engineers for the said project. And Ms. Neves has this report for us.
Thank you, Mayor. As you are all aware, the Placerville Drive Bridge, which was constructed in 1931, has now been environmentally cleared and is ready to proceed with subsequent phases, which include final design, right-of-way clearance, moving towards construction and delivery of the project. As part of the consultant contract with Dewberry, awarded by City Council at the regularly scheduled meeting on July 10th of 2018, the original scope of work for the project did include final design. The city received its federal authorization to expend design funds from Caltrans on February 21st, 2023. The action items before you this evening include appropriating that funding from the Highway Bridge Program in the amount of $619,931 and authorizing staff to issue notice to proceed number 4 on the existing contract with Dewberry Engineers in the amount of $663,100.93 for design services, right-of-way engineering tasks as proposed within their original agreement. That concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any questions on this item?
It's really exciting. It's funny. We people come in. And it's fine. I mean, it's the public, but everything. Here we just spent 600 and something thousand. Well, Sue's here. Everyone else is gone. Oh well. I don't have a question.
That it was a good comment.
Yes.
All right. I will go ahead and open up public comment.
Sue Rodman, Measure H, Measure L. This is one we've been looking forward to. And progress on getting rid of that horrible bridge is wonderful news. So, yeah, it's going to take some money. Okay, it's money well spent.
Thank you, Sue. All right, we'll close public comment, bring it back to council. Any further comments or?
What?
No, I'm not going to do another one.
I'm not going to do the other one either. I'll move the staff recommendation.
All right.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
Councilmember Gottberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Yarbrough?
Aye.
Vice Mayor No?
Aye.
Mayor Saragosa?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. One step closer. Okay, moving right along, item 12.8, which is to review proposal to replace banners on Main Street and provide staff with direction. And Cleve has his report for us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just quickly on this one, for many years the city has had banners which we've installed on our downtown light poles to increase the aesthetics of our downtown. An example of those banners are provided as an attachment to the report that we've had. We estimate at least 10 years. I'm guessing even more than that, maybe 12 to 13, because it's since before I was here. We also have Christmas decorations we put up every Christmas. This last year, after the Christmas holidays were over, we were informed by, actually before they even got to that point, by EcoScience, who's put those up, that they've fallen into such disrepair that they can no longer put them back up. And therefore, we needed to look at buying new ones. Subsequent to that, I was in a meeting with Bill Roby of the El Dorado Community Foundation at one point, and we were talking about some other funds he had potentially to put into downtown. And I brought up this issue, and he said, well, we don't need to talk about these other funds, but I'll fund that for you. I worked on some things, got some quotes, estimates for what it would cost, went back to him again, and he has agreed to kind of run the process. He would develop the options for the designs, and I want to emphasize options, which would include the potential for the existing design to be one of those. But we could bring back to the council for a selection on what would be the best design, and then he would fund those. The estimated cost is included in here. We think it's going to be somewhere around $4,100 with tax to purchase the banners. That's $112 per banner that we would be getting, 34 banners. In addition to that, which we do, I think Nick has it in his budget, we allocate the cost to put those up every year. Is that correct, Nick? $3,500 per instant to put them up and down, I believe is what it is, for them to do that. So the only other point that I wanted to make, Mr. Rowe mentioned that if this is approved and they fund these, they would like recognition on the banner in some form. I would assume it would be small lettering on the bottom of the banner that they were funded through the community foundation. So with that, unless you have any questions, I'll take those at this point.
All right. Thank you, Cleve. Any questions, comments? All right. Seeing none. Any public comments?
Isn't it wonderful that we have people who love Placerville enough to want to make this kind of a contribution? And putting their logo on the bottom of the sign lets everybody know that we do have people who are willing to make this kind of a contribution. So I think it's wonderful.
Thank you, Sue.
I do have one comment / I guess it's more of a comment than a question is, obviously if we just say make more of these, and these are the two, there's no others, just these? Are there more?
Yes, currently we have those two colors.
Those two. Those, and these are the designs, correct?
And the design.
There's no other designs.
Those are the ones that we've used in the past. Just
Right,
those
okay.
Designs, yes.
Obviously, if we just say make these again, that keeps us fairly in fairly safe territory. I don't know. You know, I mean, after destroying downtown more than once, I just what do we want to do? Do we want to give some direction? Do we want to do a process? Do we want to let Bill put some things into the public square to see what happens?
Just quickly, let me mention, we did talk about that.
Okay.
And yes, that's safe. We did also feel there's something to be said for, changing and having something new once in a while that, gives a refresh to the downtown. And so that's why we kind of at least wanted to look at that option and see what else might be out there. Again, the recommendation of the banner people is to not stray far from, in terms of putting a lot of things on there.
Right.
You just don't see them. You got to keep it pretty simple
right. Yeah.
in terms of what happens.
That part
on
is
there.
reasonable.
So,
It's it's fraught with peril.
Well,
I know.
my understanding was the El Dorado Community Foundation would kind of do the outreach to the community and take the feedback, and we could tell people to go to the El Dorado Community Foundation if they wanted to have some input.
They are going to do the process. I don't know what they didn't tell what that process is going to be, but you would have the ultimate decision
Right.
of what one you select.
Yeah.
Correct.
So basically, we'd be picking the top two.
Or
Because obviously
more.
there's
It
two
could-
different designs on here, or maybe
It could be
five or
more.
six.
We
Okay.
could,
Walk down
yeah,
Main
they
Street.
have multiple holiday
Some
ones.
cities you do see that have
Yeah.
multiple ones going down the
Yeah.
street. Kind of a similar theme, but
Right.
different.
Right. I mean, yeah.
I don't think we're going to have as much problem with it as you're thinking there, John.
When was that?
If
What
somebody-
time is it? Let's see. It's
if
8.
somebody else is going to
It's 8:12.
run the survey.
As long as we don't call it a mural, right?
Oh God! You
We
see,
can always say no at the end.
Yeah, I mean, this will be one of the options.
I
that comes
just,
back,
I
right?
love fresh. I love fresh making. And
So we
there
can
are
make
people
the
watching this
decision-
meeting as we speak.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
But we can make the decision when we see what the options are to
I-
say this is the best
You
option.
can go one step further and have some of the designs put up in the local art galleries and have the community vote on which ones, and whoever wins the top whatever, there you go. Take it out of your hands, John.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay. Anyway, yes, I like the idea of having new designs. Thank you.
Was that a motion?
Is that a motion?
Yeah, I think we should move ahead with this. I like the idea of the foundation helping and doing the process. And yes, let's look at some new designs. By all means, new designs.
All right. That's
That's a motion. I mean, what else? Is that good enough?
That's.
I moved, yes.
Yes, okay, I moved that. Okay.
second.
Thank you.
All right, we have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? All right, thank you, everybody. Okay, item 12.9, authorize one or more council members and/or staff to attend the El Dorado County Chamber Study Mission 2023 in Austin, Texas, and approve the necessary budget appropriations to go with that trip. And Mr. Morris has this item for us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As I guess I should say, some of you recall, last year this came up at a little bit later than this. It was when we learned about it. Anyway, Council elected to send me to the study mission when we went to St. Louis, Missouri last year, as well as a small town outside of St. Louis. And I want to emphasize, I don't think I stressed that in my report very well, that this is not just going to Austin, Texas, but they always go to a small town outside of the metropolitan area to kind of, look at what they could do and how they play into the what happens in the larger metropolitan area. So that will be included. We don't know what that small town is yet. We don't have all the information, but they're taking commitments for people to go to this. So as I mentioned, this year the study mission will be going to Austin, Texas. And I've included a brochure in here, actually from the one from St. Louis from last year, but it does talk about what the goals are of that to create some synergy between the different jurisdictions. This includes the Folsom Chamber of Commerce and the Rancho Cordova Chamber of Commerce. And I will state that regularly they do have council members and staff from each of those agencies that attend us. So it is not just the business community, but it is also a government community that participates in these. I was asked by a couple of you, what is the value of it? And I think my first comment was, well, I really didn't get much out of St. Louis, Missouri. but the small town, and I need to go back and look at my notes because I apologize. I forgot the name of the small town that we went to just outside of there. but it was some things that I did see there, some things in terms of signage, some of the programs that they had done. I think could fall back on us. It was a small community that had wineries around it and breweries and et cetera, and that's a lot of what we were doing. You're probably laughing right now saying Cleve was going around and looking at wineries and breweries. But anyway, that's what they did. A lot of it was showing how they had showcased those wineries and breweries in this small town and how that worked. And so there were some good things that I observed out of that and that could apply to our area, I believe.
Didn't Patty go to one, like in Nashville? Was that part of this, or was it another?
Prior to last year, when Patty could not go, she went to several of them, not just one. She went on a regular basis.
Because I think it was because she was on the committee, the economic thing.
Right. With that, if there's any questions, as noted, the cost is not set yet. Last year it was $2,950 per person. I asked them, do you anticipate we'll go up? It said it could some, but I said 3,200 and said it won't be over 3,200 is what they told me. So the 3,200 is only an estimate. I'm assuming it will be less than that. The council currently has in their conference, training, and travel budget $5,641.35. And so if you wanted to send a council member to that, the 3,200 would fall within that and could be done. I'm not aware of anything else that other council members may have planned other than maybe the regional league division meetings potentially, which are a minor cost that are not too much. So, and if there are things, you may want to consider that in your decision. So with that, I'll answer any questions that I can on this and give it back to you, Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Cleve. So any questions, comments on this item?
I don't have any questions, but I know that when Patty used to go to these, she always came back with something. There was always something there. You could argue, is it worth it? And, that's kind of subjective. I personally and professionally, in fact, when I was on SACOG board, the first time I went to a couple of these, SACOG paid for it, so that was great. And You learn stuff. You learn stuff. Whether it's worth $3,200, who knows? But someone should go and represent the city. I think personally, I think it works.
Yeah, I do think it puts us on a not the same level as our peers in other cities and counties. Is unlike not too dissimilar than SACOG in that sense. I've gone to a couple myself now. Utah and San Diego, and you really do get a lot of ideas and thoughts about what can work here, both regionally and within your own particular jurisdiction. You build up that camaraderie with your colleagues from different locations. So it is all subjective. And, if we were running a budget deficit or we were looking really bleak, I would probably say, this is the first thing you probably cut out of a budget, because there's plenty of things that you can spend on. But I think in this instance, I do think it would be good for us to have a representative on this.
And as much as I would like to send Cleve to Austin, Texas in July.
Yeah, that was going to be my caution. It was like, you guys might want to caution this. I've been to Austin, Texas. And in July it's
that's
it's hot here.
Well, that's when you get the discount rates.
Right.
I went to one in Charlottesville in the end of July, or Charlotte, North Carolina, excuse me, and it was brutal, but it was good. But I would suggest that we send, not me, because I'm making the suggestion, send a council member.
I agree. I know, and I beat you maybe, but I went to Tampa Bay in August for a convention. It was like somebody was sitting on my chest.
It's like when you walk out and they put a wet, hot blanket over your head.
Yeah, there was a reason why nobody else was in Tampa at that time except for us, because everybody leaves. It's cheap.
It's cheap.
So with that, I'll go ahead and open up public comment on this item. All right, no takers.
Oh, okay. The fiscal conservative.
All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the council.
Mayor, I know kind of the direction going. Just so you know, I have a conflict, so I wouldn't be able to go during that. So anyway,
yeah, I was just going to say that was going to be my comment too. Is I have a conflict during this particular period, but I certainly do think one of my colleagues should actually represent the city of Placerville on this trip. So, I mean, what we could do is approve it, and we can always come back, and we can work on who ultimately will be the representative to us, because I don't even know if anyone knows their schedules yet for that time.
That's what I was going to say. I don't know logistically if I could do it with my job in tonight's meeting. I can't volunteer.
So my suggestion would be that if we want to do it, we approve it, and then we can work on which one of us will ultimately do it. As you can see, we're not all like clamoring to this go on because I'm junket. So I do think that it's a good sign that we're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
All right.
So my only question on that then, do we need to come back to you to approve who goes? Or
Right.
can we...
So we have to do one of two things. We either have to authorize the mayor to appoint someone, or we have to come back to the council.
I'm pretty sure I have a conflict, but I'd have to have my calendar in front of me.
I could go. You guys aren't selling this Austin July thing.
All right, so here, let me sell Austin. Austin is beautiful.
Oh, it's a beautiful city.
It is July, so just realize you are going to Texas.
Early July.
Yeah, Austin is a great town.
Austin
Great
is a
city.
beautiful town.
It's a beautiful town. I actually will my schedule, because my first working commission meeting is until August. So at the beginning of July, I am going to be probably around. I'm not volunteering. So I would like to make a motion that we allow the mayor to appoint a player to be named later, and the budget amount to do this, to send somebody to this.
I'll second.
All right, thank you both. We're good. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. Seeing no further comments, roll call, please.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
Councilmember Gottberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Yarbrough.
Aye.
Vice Mayor No.
Aye.
Mayor Saragosa.
Aye. All right. Thank you, everybody. Okay. We're going to go ahead and move to item 13, which are council reports from other agencies. And we will start with transit.
Transit. We received and filed the proposed fiscal year 23-24 preliminary operating and capital plan budgets.
All right.
Transportation Commission.
Transportation.
We received and approved for dissemination the draft 23-24 overall work program and budget, which is basically the document that guides all El Dorado County Transportation Commission activities for the whole fiscal year, and with amendments usually as needed. An incredible document. More governments should be forced to adopt one because they are brilliant and they are very good for keeping you on task. We also received a presentation. I'm trying to remember, did we receive the presentation on the vehicle miles, the alternative to the gas tax? Was that part of that,
That
too?
was, I think, the one before.
Yeah,
The
okay.
VMT thing,
the
yeah.
VMT thing?
Yep.
But I think that might be something that we have here, because not that we do this thing and have any influence over it, but it would be great for the public to hear the presentation about going to a miles traveled tax rather than a gas tax, or in company with the gas tax. So anyway, yes.
Yeah, and that was specific to rural areas because they
Yes.
really wanted to see what the impact
Yes.
was going to be on a VMT
Yeah.
platform for a rural area versus
Yeah.
if you live in a city.
Yeah, no, it was very illuminating, and I actually went back and did some more digging on it. Was there anything else I don't remember?
We did the final State Route 49 American River.
Oh,
Convoy
that's
study.
right. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, they did a study to help with safety at the corner of 49 and Forest Hill Road down at the confluence, which right now is looking a little like the Mississippi River. It's howling down there. About the safety, lots of people in the summer, lots of people doing summer stuff. You talk about kids on Main Street not paying attention. I drive through there all the time because of my other job, and so it's a safety thing to look at. Alternatives to parking, turnouts, trucks on the road. I mean, it was a very comprehensive thing. They basically accepted it, and now now it's an idea of bringing back projects at some point in the future for funding, working between El Dorado County and Placer County. Did I covered it? Yeah.
Yep, I think so.
Yeah. Thank you.
SACOG will meet Thursday. And we have been going around. We've been doing meetings with legislators just to introduce the new delegation to SACOG and for them to get to know us, as well as to talk to them about legislation that we're sponsoring, which gives us an additional 2 years to adopt our MTP SCS because we're trying to align it more with the Bay Area and the greater region. And so that gives us a little bit more time to work through all that. Should be it shouldn't, there's no opposition to the bill, but like anything, even a bill that has no opposition can still face an uncertain future going through the legislature. So we've been, like today they met with Assemblyman Patterson. I wasn't able to make it, and we had met with Senator Alvarado Gil the week before. So we're continuing to go through the new delegation. I did that last time too. I don't know why.
So LAFCO, we made some changes to our budget processes for this upcoming year. So that was the primary thing that we did at LAFCO. And I was sworn in as the alternate city member and the only city person there that night.
Very good. Awesome. All right. Pioneer.
Yeah, so actually that was a Zoom meeting for me because I had a conflicting meeting there, so I couldn't get over to Rockland. But the two top items that we discussed was staff brought some information on a new bill, SB 1382. It has to do with basically biomass producing electricity plants and how the counties and cities will, basically the way I understand it, buy credits in production of this. So it's still being discussed. The staff was directed to bring more information back at this next meeting, which will be this Thursday, so we can kind of make some more decisions on that and whether or not it's worth it for the counties and the cities to adopt. It's kind of interesting and very convoluted all at the same time. We also had a member call in and ask a little bit about the bill and some of the NEAM 2 and NEAM 3 effects that are coming up and how that will affect Pioneer Energy Community Energy Board and how they deal with that with their solar recipients. Yeah. And that was still a lot of unclear stuff because apparently they don't do what PG&E does, but PG&E is also starting to change a few things with the NEAM 2 to NEAM 3. So that's still being brought back to the council again this meeting.
All right. Thank you, sir. A Fire Safe Council.
They worked on approving a final map, which is not just the city of Placerville, so the boundaries are a little bit bigger. Fire-wise, Placerville South got approved, so that's kind of a big deal for them.
That is a big deal.
And then, of course, this Saturday, March 18th, down at Midtown Mall, they're having a big event from 9 to 3, and hope everyone can come out. Thanks.
A mistake at the beginning.
Yeah.
We'll let your brilliance go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, apparently not. You screwed that all up. I didn't want to talk about it.
All right. 2x2. Did we comment on this last time?
No, we didn't get to it.
It was, it should have been reported last meeting, but we got cut off.
So we did have, so we did meet, we did have a 2x2 meeting with the county. It's been a while, I think, since we had one, and I think the primary topic was the new shelter, and working together to how to best not staff, but to answer calls, working with PD and with the sheriff's department, and how things go moving forward. I think we expressed our concerns with that. It's county buildings and a county structure, so we're kind of hoping that the county sheriff would be taking care of that. But as of now, PD is responding to calls for service at that location. Is kind of an ongoing discussion that will be going forward on that process. And anything else that I know was.
No, I think that covers it pretty much. Not all the details were worked out when the Board of Supervisors just suddenly approved this. So we're trying to kind of backfill and catch up with some of those details that need to be worked out.
Thank you. Okay. Last is Opportunity Knox.
Yep. So we talked about the new Department of Health Services Technical Assistance Marketplace. We extended the coordinated entry survey to March 20th, so that is still open if anybody wants to fill out that survey. That was primarily due to weather because they weren't able to get out to everyone because of the weather issues, particularly in the Tahoe Basin. Those were the ones that requested that. We approved the county entering into a data sharing agreement with the managed care partners, and then we received an update on the navigation center.
All right. Thank you. All right. I'll go ahead and open up public comments on item 13.
Do come out to the event on Saturday, and you can watch and see how it would burn Placerville down. They have a fire demonstration table, and virtual reality you can see with and without defensible space how the city would burn from 3 different directions, depending on whether the fire comes from Weber Creek or whether it comes from the north end of the city or whether it comes across from Diamond Springs. So it's going to be very interesting. I think that's one of the most interesting parts of it is to watch and see, because the difference between with defensible space and without defensible space is dramatic. It's sort of the difference between paradise and not paradise.
Sue, can you tell us where that event is?
671 Main Street, known as the Midtown Mall. So just up the street.
Former location of the fruit shed.
Is
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, fruit packing shed was there. You see, I can drop knowledge. It's okay.
Okay, good.
All right.
It'll be different than the fruit packing shed, though. And we get to have the big fire truck. Chief Cordero is going to bring us the big ladder truck and put the ladder up and put the flag on it, and said, I think the last thing was anybody who's willing to contribute at least $100,000 to building the new safety building can climb the ladder.
Nice. That sounds good. Thank you, Sue. All right. Item 14, requests for future agenda items.
When we were talking to merchants, I mentioned this to somebody. Cleve mentioned that at the bell tower, people request doing weddings there, which we thought was brilliant, at least at the moment. I don't think it's an agenda item for us, but what I think I'd like to do is maybe toss it to our Economic Advisory Committee. I would be willing to just write up a little treatise on it and see what they say. Because, I made mention to Jackie was with us, and I was down at City Hall in San Francisco. Now, that's a grand building with the grand staircase. But I was there for a while in that area, and they were pumping weddings out of that place like nobody's business. You going up, I do, I don't, whatever. Take a picture, off the stairs, next one came up, and it was like a cash cow. And I'm thinking, not too many times a week because we don't want to be contradictory, but there would be selected days, during like one a month or some number, where you would do weddings at the bell tower. And you would just crank through those things like nobody's business.
Have you ever managed a wedding event?
It wouldn't be an event. I'd go down and find out what those people in San Francisco do, because they're like, it was just like, you go, you do it, you leave. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It can be done. Well, that's why we have Economic Advisory Committee. Give this to Mickey Kaiserman. He'll figure it out. Just a thought.
Are you asking for consensus now?
No.
No?
No, I'll write.
I'm happy to support that. I like the idea.
Yeah, I'll send it to like I said, I'll write up a little thing. Cleveland and I will do it. It's his idea, actually. And we'll write up a thing, and we'll get it to the Peak, and they can tell us about it. They can go do some footwork.
Any concerns? Anybody?
I'm fine with sending it to Peak.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. All right, there you go.
Boom. My brain's back.
All right. Nothing else on 14. 15, city manager and staff reports, and item 15.1 is our police reports. Sergeant, anything you want to highlight or anything you want to say on this one? Let's put you on the spot.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Luke Goodell, Sergeant with the Placerville Police Department. I've been asked to sit in for Police Chief Joe Wren. Right now, I'm available for questions. We've had a busy month, but we're also very motivated as well. And I can field questions, and if I don't have the answers, I'll take note of that and relay it to the chief as well.
All right. Thank you, Sergeant.
Mayor, if I could just quickly, we gave you a new report tonight because there was an error on it that we got corrected, thanks to Councilmember Gottberg that pointed some out. So if you look at and it's just on the chart, under arrest, February arrest comparison, the green bar under misdemeanor previously on your one that was in your packet showed 15 rather than 25. It was actually 25, which I like 15 better, but it does show that it's kind of consistent in what is going on there. So just for your information, that's what the correction was.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Safest place I've ever been.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Actually, any public comments on this item? All right. Seeing none. Thank you, Sergeant. Thank you for filling in tonight and for spending the evening with us. So appreciate it. All right, item 15.2, which is Fire Station 25 Run Report. Chief Cordero.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. If the city attorney can get me the appropriate to release liability, I'll give you 50% off on climbing ladder truck. That's a good deal. It's only $110. No, but our crews the last month or so with the weather that we had, not only at the beginning of the year, but just the last couple of weeks, obviously, has been very impactful. And they've just done a tremendous job. And some of the impacts that they deal with, just for example, our crews in Pleasant Valley responded to a call last week and then got cut off with snow and trees down. And this involves chaining up the ambulance and the engine on the side of the road in the middle of the night, which isn't fun. From time of dispatch to time of the ambulance arriving at the hospital was 5 hours. So those type of things our crews are dealing with, and they're doing really just an amazing job. Since last Wednesday through tomorrow morning, we have had a bunch of additional resources pre-positioned through Cal OES. And there's a process we go through with whether it's fire or flood or whatever, we go through a score sheet, and Cal OES then funds those additional resources. So we've had a couple of Swiftwater teams, about 4 additional engine companies, 2 additional chief officers. It's been a good resource. Fortunately, we haven't had to really utilize them with the impacts from the storms. And then I'm very happy to announce that tomorrow morning at 0800 Medic 49 will be in service in Diamond Springs. So with that,
it's great news. Thank you for the work on it. That was, I know, not an easy thing to put back together again. So
it's been a great team effort to get this stood up, and we're really excited for it. We're doing the grand opening on March 25th, Saturday morning.
That's right.
And I think you got notices for the badge pitting ceremony for that also. So invite anyone that would like to attend that. So.
And Midtown Mall Saturday morning, 9 a.m.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions or comments? All right. Any public comments on this item? All right. Seeing none. All right. Thank you again, Chief. All right. Upcoming items, I'll let people look at those on their own. So with that, at 8:40, I will adjourn tonight's meeting. So thank you, everybody.